Hey guys, how are you all beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing fine. And yes, this is a new series live broadcasting spoilers in Marvel. A dimensional live broadcast system has come to Asgard, Kamar Taj and other places. With the exposure of various spoilers such as Avengers 3, the entire multiverse of the Marvel is in chaos. So let's start without any delay. The 9 realms, Asgard. Whoa! Tens of thousands of people gathered in the magnificent hall, and endless cheers resounded through this land of gods. Looking at Thor, who was proudly holding up the hammer of the god of thunder in his hand and receiving the cheers of the people, the king of the gods, Odin, sat high on his throne with a hint of relief in his eyes. His eldest son, Thor, would be crowned the new king of Asgard today. Odin stood up and knocked the end of his gun near to the ground. Dang! The hall quieted down. Thor Odinson, my heir. Hearing the word heir from Odin's mouth, Loki, who was standing to one side, immediately lowered his eyes. He didn't want others to see his expression. At that moment, he saw a flash of light. Loki's body suddenly disappeared from the hall as if he was never there. What? Odin's only eye widened, with a look of disbelief on his face. As a Skyfather level being, he could tell in an instant that Loki wasn't using some kind of stealth or teleportation magic. Instead, he just disappeared for no reason. Who is it? Who has the ability to kidnap my son before my eyes, the king of the 9 realms? The great hall was also in an uproar, with expressions of disbelief filling the faces of the crowd. Loki people. Why is he gone? Odin, what happened just now? Loki. Also, Thor, the god of thunder, looked left and right with a stunned expression of disbelief on his face. Although this brother of his was fond of mischief, he wouldn't play such tricks on such a solemn occasion. Just then, a huge rectangular holographic projection screen suddenly appeared in the air in the middle of the great hall. In Kamar Taj. In this isolated place, a group of disciples was practicing their magic in the square. Skillful use of the sling ring is important in spells. A black master was making his rounds among the disciples when his brow suddenly furrowed a bit. Everyone else had already constructed the beginnings of a portal by relying on the sling rings, except for an apprentice named Stephen Strange, who wasn't able to build anything. At that moment, an imposing bald woman stepped out of the building. I would like to speak to Strange alone. Looking at the current Sorcerer Supreme, the Ancient One, Stephen Strange spread out his hands helplessly. It's all because of my hands. The Ancient One looked at him with a languid gaze and spoke in a flat tone. This has nothing to do with your hand. Her words had just fallen. Suddenly, there was a flash of brilliant light, and Stephen Strange's body suddenly disappeared. Master Ancient One's pupils suddenly contracted, and the relaxed expression on her face instantly disappeared. Master Mordo was also beside himself with shock, thinking that Master Ancient One had teleported Strange away. Master, this is... Master Ancient One slightly frowned and stretched out her hand to stop Mordo from continuing. Strange disappeared in front of her by some unknown means, which was already an extremely alarming occurrence. But what surprised Master Ancient One the most was that she had looked into Strange's future before with the Eye of Agamotto, but in no way did it include the scene at hand. What is this all about? Could it be that the force that teleported Strange away had actually surpassed the Time Stone? At this time, a huge screen appeared in front of the Ancient One and the others. A private plane was soaring in the air, heading for Afghanistan. Inside the cabin, 2 men were lying on the sofa, both drunk. Looking at the unconscious Colonel James Rhodes, Tony Stark shook his head as if trying to stay awake. Upon arrival in Afghanistan, he was going to hold a demonstration of his new weapons. If everything went well, Stark Industries would be able to sign another big deal this time. But then, there was a flash of light, and Tony's figure disappeared from the cabin. In an unknown space, 4 men looked at each other. They were all at a loss. In an instant, they were transported into this unknown space. Tony looked at the 3 men beside him and his brows furrowed. One of the 3 was a middle-aged man dressed in a monk's robe and a young man of about 18 wearing a pair of dark-framed glasses. But the oddest thing was the young man with black hair's look. The man was dressed in an ancient costume with a green cloak. The weirdest thing was, on the top of his helmet, there were 2 long curved horns. Retracting his gaze, Tony shrugged his shoulders, unconcerned, and said, "Well, whoever you are, to kidnap me from a plane, your skills have certainly won my respect. Come on, how much ransom do you want?" Speaking of which, Tony asked again with some curiosity. "How on earth did you get me here from the plane? Is it some new kind of technology?" When it came to technology, the drunkenness in Tony's eyes disappeared and was replaced by a sense of enthusiasm. "If you can, please do sell me this technology. At any price you want." "Tony Stark, you really are as cocky and arrogant as the rumors have it." Stephen Strange, dressed in a monk's robe, sneered, with disdain on his face. "Even if you are the richest man in the world, your wealth is no match for magic." Tony, a public figure who was often featured on TV and in magazines, was no stranger to Strange. After seeing Master Ancient One's magic, he wouldn't be surprised by anything right now. In Strange's view, they must have fallen under someone's spell to get them into this bizarre place. Magic. Loki took 2 steps back and looked at Strange with a wary look in his eyes. What kind of magic was it? How could it transport him from under the nose of Odin, the king of the gods, to this unknown realm? "What are you talking about?" Tony's face sank. He looked at Strange as if he was crazy. He was a scientist and engineer. How could he believe in magic? Kidnapping. At Tony's words, the glasses-wearing Peter Parker's jaw dropped open, his face full of confusion. At this moment, his mind was reeling. Today at the high school, Peter was severely beaten by a bully. He thought he was unlucky enough. Who knew, when he just got home, he was inexplicably transported to this place. While stunned, Peter Parker was a little puzzled. "Tony Stark, who's that?" "The richest man in the world." "Stop joking." Peter had never heard of this person's name before. Just then, an emotionless voice rang out in the space. Interactive live quiz system launched. Bound to Marvel Multiverse. Stephen Strange has joined the live stream. Loki Odinson has joined the live stream. Tony Stark has joined the live stream. Peter Parker has joined the live stream. This system randomly broadcasts videos of past and future major events in the Marvel Multiverse. When the live stream is over, the system will ask questions to the people in the room, and those who answer correctly will receive stream points and random rewards. Stream points can be used to order a video broadcast of the past and future related to you. After the quiz, you are free to leave. The first live quiz will start in 1 minute. The streaming content is Avengers 3, Infinity War. Good luck with your quiz. Live streaming. Multiverse. Past and future. Hearing the emotionless voice in their ears, Tony and the others were stunned, and their brains almost crashed for a while. Such an incredible thing was beyond their imagination. At this time, they didn't know that, through the big screen in the air, everything happening in this live room was being watched by everyone in Asgard and Kamar Taj. Even the announcement just issued by the system, Odin, Ancient One, and others all heard it clearly. At this moment, shock and horror suddenly swept countless people. The sound of astonishment rose and fell everywhere all at once. The multiverse. What does that mean? Live broadcasting the future. How? How is that possible? The pupil in Odin's single eye instantly contracted, and his expression immediately turned grave. This mysterious system not only stole his son right under his eye but also claimed to be able to broadcast the future. It should be known that, even if he was the god king of the 9 realms, a Skyfather-level powerhouse, Odin couldn't peer into the future. If this system could really do this, how powerful was it? In Kamar Taj. The future. Master Mordo gasped. He involuntarily turned his head and looked at Master Ancient One. Master, could this be the Agamotto? Reaching out to stop Master Mordo from continuing, Master Ancient One's expression was as calm as water. Then, she raised her right hand and made a strange hand seal in the air. Immediately afterward, the eye of Agamotto hanging around the Ancient One's neck automatically turned and blossomed with an eerie green mysterious glow. At that moment, Master Ancient One's eyes suddenly widened, and she let out a soft "ha." How did that happen? Just now, she had opened up the time stone to predict the future. But the result was nothing but chaos. It seemed that since the emergence of this screen, the future of the universe had become chaotic and uncertain, making it impossible for people to see. In other words, what would happen next was completely unknown and unpredictable to the Ancient One. Impossible. The Ancient One took a deep breath, and her heart started to beat uncontrollably fast. By now, she was certain that the system that had taken Stephen Strange captive definitely possessed the power of a time realm. And, was actually able to suppress the time stone from functioning. This was simply unbelievable. Thinking about the multiverse mentioned by the system announcement just now, the Ancient One suddenly felt a strong sense of unease. Is the person behind all this actually a multiverse-level being, or even a higher one? That was a lot to take in. A multiverse-level powerhouse could not only travel freely in countless parallel universes but could also create or destroy countless universes. And the existence of a higher level than the multiverse level, its strength was so strong that even words couldn't describe it. At this time, the emotionless voice rang again, starting to invite special viewers to join the live chat group. Thor joins the live chat group. Master Mordo joins the live chat group. Live chat group. In that empty otherworldly live room, Tony and others were puzzled. Suddenly, there was a huge projection screen in front of them. Then, a series of messages appeared and scrolled up from the bottom of the screen. Thor, Loki. I can see you on screen. Thor, don't be afraid, Father and I will soon get you back to Asgard. Loki Odinson, who's afraid? Besides, I'm not begging you to save me. Tony Stark, is this, using consciousness to send messages to the screen? It feels weird. Master Mordo, Thor. Loki. Are you the gods of Asgard? Stephen Strange, Master Mordo, do you recognize these people? Peter Parker, gods. Is there really a god in this world? Winking smiley. Master Mordo, how do I put it? Actually, You can understand these gods as some kind of aliens with superpowers. Loki Odinson, mortals, don't define the gods with your barren minds. At this chaotic moment, new images began to appear on the screen. Starting to play, the Avengers 3 clip, Thanos Strikes. Thanos. Seeing this title, Odin's brow slightly wrinkled. As the God King of the Nine Realms, one of his duties was to protect the Nine Realms from external forces. Many years ago, Thanos invaded Earth. At that time, Odin himself pushed his army back. Therefore, Odin was no stranger to this crazy titan. If the live broadcast video from this system was truly a scene from the future, maybe Thanos makes waves again in the future. Video playing. In the depths of the universe, two spaceships met. The relatively small spaceship seemed to have no weapons at all and desperately pleaded with the other side not to attack. Our crew are Asgardian civilians. This is not a warship, I repeat, this is not a warship. But the immense cosmic warship showed no mercy at all and directly attacked the Asgardian spaceship. The camera pans around and shifts the image to the interior of the Asgard spaceship. There were flames and Asgardian corpses everywhere. It almost looked like a battlefield. Heimdall, an Asgardian god, was covered in wounds and lying on the ground, seemingly unable to even move. A sturdy purple giant, with his right hand holding the black and blue, with only one eye left, Thanos walked towards Loki and raised his left fist. Dread it, run from it. Destiny arrives all the same. A purple jewel was seen shining on his gloved fist. Thanos smirked, or shall I say, I am. Silence. In the halls of Asgard, the atmosphere was somewhat frighteningly quiet. There were hundreds of people gathered there. Except for the sound of people sucking in a breath, no sound could be heard. For Thor's coronation, besides the hundreds of Asgard citizens in the hall, the Queen of Asgard, Frigga, the Warriors 3, and others were all here. But at this moment, the expressions on all of their faces were similar. Everyone was stiff, holding their breath, staring blankly at the scene in front of them, their mouths wide open, unable to speak. The horrific images on the screen gave them an unprecedented blow. In that spaceship, those noble Asgardians were actually slaughtered like pigs, cattle, and sheep. And Thor, the god of thunder, as well as the god Heimdall, each was bathed in blood, wretched, it simply looked like they were close to death. After a few seconds of silence, the scene exploded, with countless Asgardians shouting out in shock. King Odin! What is going on here? Who the hell is that purple monster? Is this our future? Impossible. This must be a nightmare. Due to excessive panic, some people's voices were distorted by fear. An unstoppable panic instantly rose in everyone's heart. How could? Thor's face looked shocked, and his expression completely froze. For a moment, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He saw himself on screen, not only flustered but also without Mjolnir. More importantly, that Thor was actually wearing an eye patch, like a cyclops. Where's my hammer and my eye? Odin's one eye opened wide, and his pupil violently contracted. He couldn't figure out what kind of disaster it would take for Thor and Loki to escape with their people aboard a spaceship. More importantly, where was he, Odin? At the thought of this, Odin's expression drastically changed, a ray of unspeakable horror that couldn't be contained surged to his heart. Didn't it mean that, in this, unknown how far, future, he had died? And after his own death, Asgard also perished for unknown reasons. That's why his son Thor took the rest of his people in a lifeboat and fled across the universe. But in the end, they still met with extinction. At that thought, Odin's forehead couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Asgard may soon perish. He could imagine what kind of shocking waves would set off once this matter got out, and the 9 realms, including Jotunheim, would be boiling over. And hostile races such as the frost giants may all be ready to move. The more he thought about it, the more alarmed he felt. Odin's right hand, which was clenched in a fist, began to tremble slightly. Seeing this, Frigga leaned down and whispered in Odin's ear. "Your Majesty, even if the future on screen is true, we already know it in advance and have a chance to change it." Hearing his wife's voice, Odin calmed down a little and slightly nodded. Just then, Thor's roar rang through the hall. "Who is this Thanos? Dare to harm my people? He's a dead man." The veins on Thor's head popped out. He looked at Odin and said, "Father, please let me lead an army out into the universe to find that damn Thanos and beat his brains out." Looking at the furious Thor, Odin frowned. "You're only thinking from the standpoint of a warrior right now. Not considering the other possibilities at all." For Odin, although the threat from Thanos was enormous, he still needed to find out why Asgard would perish. And how he died. Maybe there was an unknown enemy lurking in the shadows. What other possibilities? Thor waved his hammer angrily. "How dare this purple bastard offend our Asgard? I, as the king." Hearing this, Odin finally succumbed to the anger in the heart and sternly shouted, "You are not the king yet." Under Odin's loud shout, the entire hall instantly fell into silence. Even Thor froze in place, unable to say anything. At this moment, the live chat group was extremely lively. "Tony Stark, Thor. Loki. Are you really the gods of Norse mythology? But that's a spaceship on screen. How can there be a god in a spaceship? Loki Odinson, mortal. Be quiet. Who says that gods couldn't travel in spaceships? Don't speculate about us with your tiny minds. Tony Stark, ha, don't act tough. I think that Master Mordo is right. You're just a group of aliens. Tony Stark, but who's that Thanos and his oddly shaped crew? Are they some kind of space pirates? Thor, humph, you don't need to know. Anyway, I'm going to kill Thanos soon anyway. Master Mordo, ha ha, good luck. Peter Parker, the legendary gods. Could it be, are all this stuff real? Loki Odinson, what do you mean by stuff? You should kneel down when facing the gods. At this time, there were new changes on the screen. Thanos grabbed Thor's head with one hand and spoke to Loki in front of him. The Tesseract, or your brother's head. Tesseract. Odin's mind was reeling. 1,000 years ago, the frost giants invaded Midgard, landed in Tonsberg, Norway, and tried to plunge the earth into an ice age with the casket of ancient winters. Odin led his army to Earth and defeated the frost giants in a fierce battle. It was also because of this battle the Tesseract was stranded on Earth, missing. But listening to Thanos on screen, it seemed that the Tesseract was back in the hands of the Asgardians. At the same time, Odin also recognized the glove worn by Thanos and the purple gem shining on it. It was none other than the Infinity Gauntlet and the Power Stone. Odin was no stranger to the Infinity Gauntlet. Years ago, he ordered the dwarfs of Nidavellir, one of the 9 realms, to forge a pair of Infinity Gauntlets for him. This Infinity Gauntlet, worn on the right hand, was currently stored in Odin's vault, guarded by the terrifying destroyer. However, Odin really didn't expect that Thanos could actually create another Infinity Gauntlet. And get an Infinity Stone and set it in the gauntlet. No wonder he wants the Tesseract. Odin frowned and muttered something in a low voice. As the king of the 9 realms, he certainly knew how powerful the Infinity Gauntlet with its collection of 6 stones was. Enough to shake the whole universe. And in the Tesseract, it just so happened that the space stone of the 6 stones was sealed. But at the moment, Odin's mind was more concerned about something other than the Tesseract. Faced with the threat of Thanos, what choice would Loki make in the video? The video continued. Loki raised his hand and in his palm, a blue cube slowly appeared. Thanos smiled. Your optimism is misplaced, Asgardian. Well, for one thing, I am not an Asgardian, Loki interrupted Thanos, and for another, we have the Hulk. What tilde. Upon hearing this, there was an uproar in Asgard's great hall. Even the corner of Odin's eye involuntarily twitched. Looking at the screen, Loki pursed his lips. At that moment, the video on screen suddenly stopped. Then, the cold voice of the system rang. End of the current video. The quiz begins. Question: whose hands did the Tesseract end up in? A. Loki. B. Thor. C. Thanos. Please start answering. Each person in the live room has only one chance to answer. Those who answer correctly will receive broadcast points, as well as random rewards. Random rewards may originate from countless alternate worlds. Failure to answer the question will trigger an unknown penalty. As soon as the system's words fell, the live chat group was instantly boiled up. Master Mordo, Thor, is the relationship between you and your brother that bad? Or, is this just how the Asgardians are? Stephen Strange, yeah, it's really heartbreaking to see such a blatant disregard for life. Loki Odinson. Thor, humph, what are you weak wizards babbling on about? What that Loki on screen is doing is correct. Master Mordo. Peter Parker, ha. Thor, why would you want to die? Thor, I am the mighty god of thunder. A noble warrior of Asgard. If I am ever defeated by my enemies, it's because I'm not strong enough. Thor, in turn, if Thanos really wants the Tesseract that badly, then we must not let him get away with it. Thor, so. Loki. You did a great job. This is the way we Asgardians do things. Ha 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 ha. Master Mordo, you. Tony Stark, oh, are you sure you're Asgardians, not Spartans? In Asgard, Frigga shook her head helplessly. Odin, on the throne, also had the urge to sigh helplessly. Thor, this silly son, why is his brain so single-minded? In the live streaming room, Loki breathed a sigh of relief. The trademark evil smile appeared on his face. Luckily, Thor is a muscle brain. With 2 chuckles, Loki immediately focused his attention back on the question posed by the system. After thinking for less than a second, he answered aloud. The answer is a Loki. In Loki's view, this topic was too simple. After all, the Loki on screen was clearly not saving anyone. He would rather see Thor die than hand over Tesseract. As long as that Loki could confuse Thanos with his magic and then find a chance to escape from the ship, it would be a good ending. Although Thor is a little pitiful, I can't die together with him, right? But just then, the system's cold voice rang out. Ding! Loki Odinson has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding! Loki Odinson's answer is incorrect. Random penalty imposed. Erasing 1/3 of Loki Odinson's magic powers. Implement immediately. I was wrong. Loki's eyes widened as he exclaimed in disbelief. Just as Loki shouted out loud, an unprecedented sense of weakness suddenly swept through him. His magic was personally taught by Frigga herself and had been studied for nearly 1,000 years, making him one of the top sorcerers in Asgard. And his thousands of years of hard work to obtain his magic power, like evaporating into thin air, instantly shrunk by 1/3. Thus, Loki's face suddenly turned pale. Cold sweat seeped from his forehead, and the anger and confusion in his heart were even more indescribable. And at that moment, a calm voice suddenly sounded in his ears. I choose answer C. Thanos. Loki turned his head abruptly. He saw the middle-aged man in monk's robes, opening his mouth to utter his answer. Ding! Stephen Strange has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding! Stephen Strange's answer is correct. Ha! Stephen Strange let out a long sigh of relief, and a small smile appeared on his face. He could clearly see that Thanos had gained the absolute upper hand on that spaceship. Neither Thor nor Loki was likely to escape from his palm. In that case, the Tesseract, in the end, could only fall into Thanos's hands. Soon, the system's voice continued to chime. Stephen Strange gets 100 live broadcast points, which can be used to request the broadcasting of past or future events related to himself. Stephen Strange won a random reward. Odin's Gungnir. What? Sitting on Asgard's throne, Odin looked at the huge screen in the air and almost thought that he had misheard it. Gungnir was his personal weapon. Who dared to use it as a reward? At that moment, Odin only felt his right hand loosen and involuntarily twisted his head to see. His hand was empty, and the glittering Gungnir had disappeared without a trace. The Gungnir has been given to Stephen Strange. It has been successfully bound. From now on, Stephen Strange will be the sole owner of this spear. The reward has been issued. In Asgard, the main hall. Countless citizens stood frozen in place, staring dumbly at Odin on the throne, each with a paralyzed expression and dazed eyes. Gungnir, the weapon in the hands of Odin, the God King of 9 realms, was unknowingly transferred away. How is that possible? Your Majesty, you. Frigga had awkwardness written all over her face. She looked like she wanted to console Odin but didn't quite know what to say. Damn it. Odin's empty right hand fiercely clenched into a fist. The muscles on his face twitched as his cheeks looked swollen with anger and red. Considered as a Skyfather-level figure, the God King of the 9 realms, the All-Father of Asgard, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? But in his annoyance, Odin felt an extremely strange sense of horror that almost made his heart pound. It was unbelievable. Someone could actually take away the weapon in his hand without him knowing, while under the eyes of the public. How powerful was the mysterious system that could do this incredible thing? At this time, in the live streaming room, Loki's face was full of envy. He couldn't help pointing at Stephen Strange and shouting, "Mortal, how are you qualified to possess such a divine weapon? Why aren't you putting down the Gungnir in your hand yet?" Stephen Strange's gaze flashed. He coldly looked at Loki. At the same time, the Gungnir in his hand also emitted a radiant golden glow. What? Feeling the infinite divine power contained in the golden light, Loki felt his scalp tingling. He involuntarily took a step back and exclaimed, You can really control the Gungnir. King Odin's Gungnir could not only emit a powerful beam but also could hit any target as long as it was thrown. It could also puncture anything it hits. Even if it was a god, being hit head-on would only lead to death. This spear was undoubtedly the most powerful weapon in Asgard and was even seen as a symbol of Odin's royal power. Looking at the golden light emanating from Gungnir alone, Loki felt the hairs on his back standing up. I'm going to die. If he were hit by the divine spear, even if he had 10 lives, it wouldn't be enough. But, how is that possible? How could this mortal control such a terrifying divine weapon? In Kamar Taj, library. Home. Why is it so lively outside? Master Wong, who was reading a book in the library, raised his head and looked out of the window in wonder. He could faintly hear a cry of alarm coming from outside the window. Something incredible seemed to have happened. Finding that the book in his hand had reached the end, Wong shook his head, stood up, and casually drew a golden portal in the air. Watching the library all day was a bit boring after a long period of time. So, out of curiosity, Wong also wanted to see what was going on that could make these apprentices so excitable. In the square, as soon as Wong stepped out of the portal, his eyes froze. Over the square, he saw that somehow a huge screen had emerged. A freeze-frame image was displayed on the screen. In the bottom right corner of the screen, another view was displayed in the form of a picture within a picture. In the small picture, 4 men were standing in a strange space. Among them, the most conspicuous one was a man dressed in a monk's robe and holding a golden spear in his right hand. With his extensive knowledge over the years, Wong recognized at a glance that this spear was the weapon of God King of the 9 realms, Odin, the Gungnir. And the man with the spear turned out to be Stephen Strange, who had come to borrow books from him not long ago. What on earth, what happened? Wong's face looked shocked, his eyes were full of disbelief. How did that budding apprentice, who just started out, get the 9 realms #1 weapon? Besides, Strange had only studied magic for a few days. How could he control Odin's Gungnir? Just as Wong was dumbfounded, he suddenly found that the messages at the bottom of the big screen began to roll. In the live chat group. Thor, Strange or whomever, hurry up and give Gungnir back. That isn't something that a mortal like you can grasp. Master Mordo, ha ha, Thor, why did you say that? Stephen obviously won it by his own skills. Why should he give it back? Mordo was a stickler for rules, even a bit rigid. In his view, since Stephen Strange answered correctly by his own skill, he was entitled to the reward. Whoever it was, even the gods of Asgard, had no right to take this Gungnir away from him. Mordo was an extremely serious type of man. However, when he thought of the legendary god King Odin, Mordo still felt a little weak. He couldn't help but look back at the Ancient One. The Ancient One noticed his tentative eyes. Although there was no expression on her face, she didn't speak out against it. Upon seeing this, Mordo suddenly felt happy. With the support of Master Ancient One, there were a bunch of disciples watching. He couldn't undermine Kamar Taj's name. Master Mordo, Thor, if you really want this spear, come to our Kamar Taj and get it later. Thor, bastard, what Kamar Taj? Wait and see. I'll beat you guys up. At the moment, in Asgard, Odin, who was watching the messages, realized something. Kamar Taj, that's where the Sorcerer Supreme is. Maybe, the one who obtained Gungnir is a disciple of the Ancient One. This will be a problem. Master Ancient One is the guardian of the earth and has repelled the invasion of dimensional demons many times. It even included Dormammu. In terms of strength, the Ancient One was never under Odin. At this point, the picture framed by the big screen began to change. The video continued to play. Hearing Loki's decisive answer, Thanos' face was solemn. Then, he raised his left hand and pressed the Power Stone on Thor's head. As soon as he touched the Power Stone, Thor immediately let out a harsh scream. He seemed to be suffering a great deal of pain. Thor. Looking at Thor's miserable appearance on screen, Frigga couldn't help but reach out and cover her mouth. The blue veins on Odin's forehead stood out. The rage in his heart grew stronger and stronger. Thanos, you're dead. No one in the universe can save you. Odin, said so. The video continued. Listening to Thor's miserable shout. Looking at his miserable appearance, the muscles on Loki's face slightly twitched. In the end, he finally couldn't help shouting, "Enough, stop." Thanos removed the Power Stone from Thor's head. Thor gasped and reluctantly said, "We don't have the Tesseract. It was destroyed with Asgard." What? Hearing these words, countless people in Asgard's hall were shocked. Their eyes widened in disbelief. The entire hall was surprisingly quiet. It was pin-drop silence. At this moment, what emerged from the hearts of the crowd was a nearly endless shudder. Frigga's face instantly lost its color, and she unconsciously took 2 steps back. Odin closed his only eye. If seeing Thor's tragic appearance on screen was a shock to these Asgardians, now it's total horror. Thor's words were the deepest nightmare in their hearts. In the future, Asgard would indeed perish. And they, all of them, may die. Panic. Horror. Almost everyone in the hall couldn't help but shudder. A freezing cold feeling swept through everyone's body. The fear of death seemed to shatter their guts and freeze their souls. Even the battle-hardened warriors like Asgard's warriors, they were showing a trace of trepidation. Some timid people were even sweating like rain. Their legs were trembling, almost collapsing on the ground. "Your Majesty. What should we do?" "Yes. What should we do?" For a moment, it seemed that everyone was asking this question, and everyone was panicking. In the face of the incessant appeals of the people, Odin stood up from his throne and shouted, "Heimdall!" Soon, from beyond the great hall, a deep voice came in. "Your Majesty, I have just observed the entire planet of Titan and found no trace of Thanos. If we were to find his spaceship in the universe, it would be too extensive and would take a lot of time." As the guardian of Asgard, Heimdall's eyes could see through the entire 9 realms. But if they wanted him to find someone in the vast universe, it wouldn't happen overnight. As Odin heard it, his white eyebrows slightly moved, but his heart calmed down. At this moment, Odin had made up his mind. As long as Heimdall found Thanos' location, he would immediately lead his army to attack and kill him as soon as possible. In this way, not only could he eliminate a hidden problem for Asgard in advance, but also deter those enemies hiding in the shadows, so they wouldn't even dare think of attacking. After this doomed future was completely exposed, only such a thunderous measure could restore the confidence of the people of Asgard and stabilize his rule. At the moment, on the other side, Frigga's eyes had a faint hint of worry. Odin's most powerful weapon was the Gungnir, but now, it was inexplicably lost. This seemed like an ominous sign. On the big screen, the video continued. Loki looked at Thor, who was covered in blood, and helplessly raised his right hand as a blue tesseract began to take shape in his palm gradually. Thor shouted disappointedly, "You are the worst brother ever." Loki walked up, holding up the tesseract, and spoke to Thor, "I assure you, brother, the sun will shine on us again." Thanos sneered, "Your optimism is misplaced, Asgardian." Loki raised his eyebrows, "Well, for one thing, I'm not Asgardian, and for another, we have a Hulk." Thanos's pupils contracted and twisted his head to look behind him. At this moment, a green monster descended from behind him, and it flew towards Thanos. This unexpected change instantly stunned countless viewers. "Thor, Loki, is this your plan?" Master Mordo, "Humph, worthy of the legendary Norse god of lies, really tricky." Loki Odinson, "It's called a battle of wits, not strength. You foolish mortals, how could you understand the wisdom of the gods?" Tony Stark, "Is this green guy, the legendary Hulk?" Stephen Strange, "Do you recognize this monster?" Tony Stark, "I just heard from the news that last month this guy got into a fight with another monster in New York and nearly leveled the entire Broadway area." Stephen Strange, "Last month? I was out of New York by then." Peter Parker, "What? I've been living in New York. How come I've never heard of this?" Tony Stark, "Hello, you're not kidding, right? How can you not know about something so big? Even I heard about it in California." Tony Stark, "Are you really from New York?" Peter Parker, At this moment, Peter Parker was really in a trance. Was I living in a fake New York? Stephen Strange, "If this green guy is really that strong, maybe he can beat that purple Thanos." In Asgard, Odin sat on the throne, looking at the messages rolling at the bottom of the screen in front of him, and secretly sighed. Thanos, with the Infinity Gauntlet and Power Stone, could already be compared with him as the God King, purely on power. That green monster wouldn't be able to beat him at all. Besides, what surprised Odin the most was the sentence, "I'm not an Asgardian," spoken by Loki on the screen. Being able to say such words, had that future Loki found out about his real origins? Thinking of that, Odin's expression suddenly turned extremely complicated. The video continued. Although the Hulk relied on sneak attacks to temporarily gain the upper hand, he was soon pinned down by Thanos. And under Thanos's heavy mountainous fist, it didn't take long for the Hulk to bleed out and fall to the ground. At this time, Thor grabbed an iron pipe and attacked Thanos from behind. But he was immediately knocked down by Thanos, and Ebony Maw imprisoned him with steel bars around his throat. At this desperate moment, Heimdall, who was seriously injured, mobilized the Bifrost to teleport the Hulk away. As the video proceeded, some people in the live chat were already tensing up. Tony Stark, hey, how come this purple guy is so powerful?" Peter Parker, "That's terrible. Is this the power of aliens?" Mordomage, "In addition to Thanos, the 5 subordinates next to him don't seem like weaklings. I'm afraid this battle isn't over yet." Loki Odinson, Heimdall, "Since you can still use the Bifrost, please send Thor and me away." "What's the use of sending that big green guy away?" Thor, "Loki, calm down. Heimdall, in the video, should have lost a lot of power. The green guy is right next to him, so it can't be helped." Loki's brow furrowed, and he suddenly let out a bitter chuckle. He never dreamed that he would be persuaded to calm down by Thor one day. But the situation in the video was truly close to desperation. Loki thought that if he really fell into such a state, all he could do was to run away. Seeing the Hulk being teleported away, Thanos took a battle blade from Corvus Glaive, walked to Heimdall, and coldly said, "That was a mistake." Then Thanos raised his blade and once pierced Heimdall's chest. Seeing this, Thor, the imprisoned god of thunder, let out a miserable scream, "No!" Seeing this, a state of dead silence once again fell in Asgard's great hall. Those who were watching the video seemed to be able to feel Heimdall's despair and pain as he was dying through the screen. Damn it! Thor's face twitched, his teeth clenched. At the core of the Bifrost, there was no emotion on Heimdall's face, but the two golden pupils showed a hint of complexity. Although he had a pair of eyes, powerful enough to see through the 9 realms, he never dreamed that he would witness his own death one day. The video continued. Ebony Maw knelt down on one knee and offered the Tesseract in his hand to Thanos, while respectfully saying, "No other being has ever had the might nor ability to wield not one but 2 Infinity Stones. The universe lies within your grasps." Thanos crushed the Tesseract with his empty hand and took out the Space Stone from inside. Next, he set the Space Stone on the Infinity Gauntlet, and a blue glow instantly illuminated the entire interior of the ship. Even the corners of Odin's eyes twitched when he saw Thanos successfully obtain the power of a second Infinity Stone on the screen. At this critical moment, the image suddenly stopped, and then the system's emotionless voice rang. Question: what will Loki do next? A. Escape by himself. B. Save Thor and run away together. C. Free Thor, then the two join forces to fight Thanos. D. He tries to kill Thanos with a hidden dagger on his own. Please start answering. Each person in the live streaming room has only one chance to answer. Failure to answer the question will trigger an unknown penalty. Hearing this question, Loki's eyes snapped open. Loki thought about the situation. If he was really in that situation, the only thing he could do was to run away. Otherwise, stay and wait for death. Just as Loki was about to speak, he suddenly remembered another thing. From the videos so far, it seemed that the relationship between himself and Thor in the future was a bit unusual. For this stupid brother, he turned over the Tesseract. From this point of view, would the future self really abandon Thor to escape alone? Just when Loki hesitated, a voice suddenly sounded beside him. "I choose a runaway by himself." Loki looked back and saw Stephen Strange holding the Gungnir, smiling confidently. "You should be the Norse god of trickery, and that brother of yours is also the god of thunder, Thor, right? I don't know if you guys are authentic gods, but if what the myths say is true, Loki, you would never be the kind of guy who would put his life on the line for someone else. So, I'm sure the video will show you choosing to escape alone." Having just won the Gungnir by answering a question, Strange was full of confidence at the moment. Therefore, he made his own choice without hesitation. You bold mortal." Loki gritted his teeth. He felt a little guilty at the moment he heard Strange's words. To be honest, Loki really didn't know what other choice there was besides running away by himself if he was placed in the life and death situation on screen. Ding! Stephen Strange has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding! Stephen Strange's answer is incorrect. Random penalty imposed. Erasing 1/3 of Stephen Strange's magic powers. Implement immediately. Why? Stephen Strange's mind trembled, and his expression suddenly froze. In Kamar Taj. Strange is always overconfident. Master Mordo looked at the system announcement in the messages at the bottom of the screen and shook his head helplessly. Master Ancient One, standing next to him, waved her fan and indifferently said, "It doesn't matter, anyway. He doesn't have much magic, even if a third is missing, it doesn't make much difference. Looking at Master Ancient One having a calm expression, Master Mordo's face was filled with speechlessness. You make so much sense that I am speechless. Seeing Stephen Strange's incorrect choice, Loki suddenly felt refreshed. Now there were 3 options left. Among them, D. Trying to kill Thanos with a hidden dagger on his own, was simply suicide, which he completely ignored. And C. Free Thor, then join forces to fight Thanos, didn't look reliable either. In Loki's view, the only option left was B. I choose B. Save Thor and run away together. Loki looked up and shouted out the answer, then expectantly looked at the screen in the sky. Ding! Loki Odinson has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding! Loki Odinson's answer is incorrect. Random penalty imposed. Randomly erase 10 kinds of spells mastered by Loki Odinson. Implement immediately. Whoosh! Loki fiercely covered his head with his hands as his head felt dizzy. When he came to his senses, he was immediately shocked to find that he had actually forgotten 10 types of spells. Although he still remembered the names of these spells, he didn't know how to wield them. Are you kidding me? At this moment, while heartbroken beyond measure, Loki really was a bit skeptical about life. What the hell is going on? If both A and B were wrong, wouldn't the remaining 2 options require him to fight Thanos? What's the difference between that and death? How could the future him do such a stupid thing? Tony Stark, oh, now I'm really impressed with this Loki. I didn't think he would have the guts to fight that strange purple potato monster. Peter Parker, Purple Potato Monster, ha ha ha, this nickname sounds funny. Stephen Strange, damn, I was really deceived by Loki's appearance. I thought he was the kind of character who would only scheme. I didn't expect him to be so brave. Master Mordo, Stephen, you can't judge a book by its cover. You still have a lot to learn. Loki Odinson, enough, you insolent mortals, are you all looking for death? Thor, brother, you will grow up to be a great man in the future. Sure enough, like me, you are a hero of Asgard. Loki Odinson, shut up, don't compare me with you. Peter Parker, Loki, why should you be embarrassed? Now that A and B have been ruled out, the most likely one left should be C. Thor, that's right. Loki should first rescue me, and then we 2 brothers teamed up. We will be able to beat that purple potato monster. At this time, Loki felt a little shaken. Didn't it mean that his future self would really make this such a thoughtless move? Tony Stark, you call yourselves gods, but you haven't even seen through such a trick yet. Stephen Strange, what do you mean? Tony Stark, carrot. From just now on, Tony had been carefully studying the question raised by the system and had somewhat figured out some rules. In his view, this system was trying to trick people. Sometimes, the impossible answer was often the correct one. Thinking of that, Tony Stark raised his head with confidence, looked at the screen in the sky, and shouted. I choose D. He tries to kill Thanos with a hidden dagger on his own. What? Listening to Tony's answer, the other 3 in the live stream room showed incredible expressions on their faces. Soon, the system's emotionless voice rang. Ding! Tony Stark has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding! Tony Stark's answer is correct. Tony Stark gets 100 live broadcast points, which can be used to request the broadcasting of past or future events related to himself. Tony Stark won a random reward. Megatron, the leader of the Decepticons. Start binding. It has been successfully bound. From now on, Tony Stark will be the sole owner of Megatron. The reward has been issued. Megatron. Decepticons. Hearing these strange names, Tony Stark was slightly stunned. Soon, along with the crack 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 sound, a silver mechanical giant appeared in front of Tony. Is this a robot? It's beautiful. Looking at the tall, silver body, with both eyes glowing red, the body emitted a terrifying sense of oppression like Megatron. Tony felt a sense of trembling spread throughout his body, and even goosebumps came out. This kind of feeling was like standing at the foot of a giant beast. Having dealt with machinery for most of his life, Tony never thought that a robot could give him such a strong impact. At this time, beside Tony, Loki was completely overwhelmed. You. Loki pointed to Tony, his face was shocked, and his expression was completely frozen. How can you possibly guess the correct answer? Wait, this can't be the right answer at all. Because of the excessive shock, Loki's words became incoherent. How could I stab Thanos with a dagger? There must be some mistake. Loki had 2 little daggers with him since he was a child, just like toys. When he was 8 years old, he used one of them to stab Thor. But in the end, this rough-skinned stupid brother soon recovered. Wasn't stabbing Thanos with a dagger that couldn't even harm the 8-year-old Thor completely a joke? Seeing Loki pointing at Tony and yelling, Megatron's eyes flashed. As soon as he raised his hand, it assembled into cannon and aimed at Loki. Boy, how dare you be so rude to my lord? I will destroy you. Just as Megatron spoke, the cannon in his hand suddenly lit up with a brilliant light, almost as if a small sun had suddenly lit up in the live-streaming room. My goodness! Feeling the terrifying energy contained in the muzzle, Loki was so scared that his body almost shook. Loki's physical strength was far better than that of an ordinary human, but he couldn't resist such a horrifying attack. Wait, you shouldn't pull out laser cannons here. Seeing that Megatron was about to kill someone at the drop of a hat, Tony was also startled and quickly stopped him. Seeing that the mechanical giant in front of him finally obeyed the command and put down the muzzle, Tony first breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly his eyes widened and he remembered one thing. Just now, this robot launched an attack in order to protect the dignity of his master without receiving any orders. Does this mean you have intelligence? Looking up at Megatron, Tony's voice was filled with astonishment. That's right. Megatron's red electronic eyes flashed and proudly replied. We Cybertronians are mechanical beings from Cybertron, with independent personality and consciousness, definitely not something cyborgs can compare to. Cybertron. Megatron. Peter Parker and Stephen Strange looked at each other, and both of them could see the horror and shock in each other's eyes. Strange just got Gungnir, but to be honest, he had no idea how powerful this spear was. However, as an educated modern man, Strange knew what a mechanical life form from an alien planet meant. This was a very different life form from humans, or carbon-based life form. Ha 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 ha, that's awesome, that's an awesome reward. Looking at Megatron in front of him, Tony's face turned red with excitement. He couldn't help but step forward and stretch out his hand to touch Megatron's steel body. His eyes were full of fascination and fervor. One of Tony's life goals was to create a mechanical life with a real independent personality. That's why he developed artificial intelligence, J.R.V.I.S, the A.I. butler. but he simply never dreamed that he would get such an incredible alien mechanical creature by answering a question. Moreover, as one of the top engineers on Earth, Tony could see at a glance that this robot in front of him was definitely a first-class weapon of war. Every detail on Megatron was the perfect embodiment of mechanical engineering. Tony could be sure that by studying the mechanical life in front of him, he would certainly be able to create new inventions, beyond imagination. At this point, Megatron spoke in a voice full of prestige. "Lord, I'm willing to serve you. However, I still hope that you can create a robot army for me, and I will then command them." Robot army. Hearing this term, Tony's eyebrows twitched and he instantly fell into contemplation. After seeing those bizarre live broadcasted videos on the big screen, Tony had now realized that the universe wasn't as simple as he had imagined. Terrible aliens and cosmic wars were all real. In this sense, it was a necessity to establish a robot army. At the same time, an idea suddenly flashed through Tony's mind. Could this system's broadcast point really be used to broadcast one's past and future on demand? Tony wasn't interested in the past, but as a super scientist, he was very curious about the future. You. Watching Tony and Megatron converse like nobody's business, seeming to have forgotten about his own existence, Loki was beside himself with anger. But in this case, he was afraid to say anything more. Otherwise, if he provoked an attack from that terrifying mechanical monster, it would be no laughing matter. Glancing at the Gungnir in Strange's hand with hatred, Loki's heart suddenly flooded with bitterness. Originally, as a god of Asgard, he should be the strongest in this live streaming room. But up to now, except for the young man who wore glasses and looked a little clueless, he was the weakest one. And it's all because those two guys got the question right and got the magical rewards. Thinking of this, Loki bitterly gritted his teeth and made up his mind. The next time the system asked a question, he must get the right answer. And get a powerful reward. At this moment, through the picture-in-picture in the big screen, the crowd of Kamar Taj and Asgard also saw the scene in the live streaming room. Seeing Loki's embarrassment in front of Megatron, Odin sighed helplessly. "My adopted son seems to be lacking in training." And at that moment, on the screen that paused, the video played again. The video continued. In the spaceship, looking at the Infinity Gauntlet on his left hand, Thanos said, "There are 2 more stones on Earth. Find them, my children, and bring them to me." The 5 members of the Black Order knelt down. At this moment, Loki suddenly walked out from the side and said, "If you're going to Earth, you might want a guide. I do have a bit of experience in that arena." Thanos sneered, "If you consider failure an experience." Loki shrugged, "I consider experience. Immediately after, Loki's look turned solemn. He looked at Thanos and said, "I, Loki, Prince of Asgard, Odinson, the rightful king of Jotunheim, god of mischief, do hereby pledge to you." But while he was talking, the restrained Thor could clearly see that Loki was using magic to conjure up a dagger on his left hand. "My undying fidelity." As soon as Loki said that, he raised the dagger hidden in his left hand and jabbed it at Thanos' throat. But Thanos simply raised the Infinity Gauntlet, and the light of the Space Stone enveloped Loki's left hand, locking him in place. Undying. Thanos grabbed Loki's right hand and sneered, "You should choose your words more carefully." Throwing away the dagger from Loki's hand, Thanos wrapped his Infinity Gauntlet hand around Loki's neck and lifted him into the air. Although Loki desperately struggled, he was unable to break free from Thanos' grasp. will never be a god. Loki only had time to say these words. A crack came from his neck as he died by Thanos' hand. Oh, God. Loki opened his mouth wide and stared at the screen in horror. The sight of himself on screen, bleeding from 7 orifices, limp and motionless, struck his heart and even made him feel that it wasn't real. At this moment, he was frozen, even stupefied. His brain was almost short-circuited. In Asgard's hall, when the crowd saw Loki fight against Thanos with all his might, but in the end, he was defeated and died, everyone felt a great shock. The man who was known as someone who only knew how to scheme showed such fearlessness when facing such a strong enemy. Simply awe-inspiring. Is that really Loki? It's unbelievable, such bravery. Almost catching up to Prince Thor. I didn't think we had such a warrior hidden in Asgard. Loki. Tears welled up in Frigga's eyes as she reached up and covered her mouth. Odin's one eye emitted a stern light, his right fist clenched and then slowly unclenched. In his eye, apart from the pain, there was a shock. All along, he always thought that this son only knew how to play around. Odin never dreamed that Loki could grow to this point in the future. He was a totally different person. Seeing Loki's death in the video. Not to mention those people in Asgard, Loki himself was stunned by the scene before him. At this moment, he couldn't believe his eyes. You know. He's a sorcerer. A sorcerer, armed only with a dagger, tried to stab Thanos, who had just flattened Thor and the Green Giant. Wasn't this just looking for death? The more he thought about it, the more he felt confused. Even Loki's mind went blank, he lost the ability to think, stuck in the confusion. At this point, the live chat room had been scrolling. Thor, Loki, why are you so stupid? You should have rescued me first, and then we could have killed Thanos together. Thor, I can't believe it. You usually look smart, but you're even more impulsive than me. Loki Odinson, what? What did you say about me just now? Loki's cheeks slightly twitched. For a moment, an urge to explode in anger rose up. He, Asgard's most scheming god, was actually lectured by Thor, who was only a muscle-brained oaf. Thor, but, brother, you're really amazing. The difference in strength was so huge, but you still had the courage to charge up without hesitation. With such courage, you get 2 thumbs up from me. Thor, when we go to the battlefield in the future, I will entrust my back to you, ha 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 ha. While praising Loki, Thor had already made up his mind that no matter what the cost, he would find that damned purple potato monster. Then smash his head with Mjolnir. Peter Parker, Mr. Loki is really amazing. Uncle Ben told me, with great power comes great responsibility. If you meet someone who needs help, you should stand up without hesitation. Peter Parker, I never understood it, but seeing Mr. Loki in action today did teach me something. Loki Odinson, enough. Thor. Brat. Both of you, stop talking. Don't judge me as you please. At this moment, Loki's heart really collapsed. What the hell is going on? Was the Loki in the video infected by Thor's stupidity? The video continued. Thanos throws Loki's body in front of Thor and coldly says, "No resurrections this time." With that, Thanos raised the Power Stone on the Infinity Gauntlet in his left hand, lighting up a purple glow that swept through the entire ship. Then, the interior of the ship began to fall apart gradually. Thanos used the Space Stone to teleport, and he disappeared together with the Black Order. Thor broke free of the restraints on his body and crawled over to Loki's body, his face full of grief and pain. With a loud boom, the entire spaceship shattered into countless pieces. In the great hall of Asgard, looking at the tragic scene in front of them, the eyes of the crowd had changed. Surprisingly, their mentality had also changed. That desperate general panic had actually disappeared. More and more people were watching the screen without saying a word. They had admiration in their eyes as if they were staring at heroes. Asgardian culture revered the brave and the heroic, especially the tragic heroes who fought to the death. Loki and Thor in the video perfectly met these characteristics. After seeing the two princes both died in battle, the fear of facing the end of their days had mostly disappeared. After all, even the son of the God King fought hard until the end, so what were they afraid of? It's just death. At that moment, the cold voice of the system came from the big screen. End of the current video. The quiz begins. Question: who survived among Loki and Thor? Who died? A. Loki survived, and Thor died. B. Thor survived, and Loki died. C. Both of them survived. Please start answering. Each person in the live room has only one chance to answer. Failure to answer the question will trigger an unknown penalty. When the new question and the corresponding answers appeared on the big screen, it suddenly shocked countless people. Asgard's hall, which had already quieted down, was boiling again. What's going on? Could it be that Thor, Loki, and the others aren't dead yet? Countless people stared in disbelief. Exclamations of incredulity were heard as they crossed each other's ears. Frigga and Odin looked at each other. Both could see the look of surprise in each other's eyes. Just now, they thought that their two sons were dead. But from the three answers displayed on the screen, in the future, at least one of the two brothers, Thor or Loki, survived. Of everyone, no one was more excited than Thor, the god of thunder. Ha ha! Loki, I knew you wouldn't die that easily. Thor looked up and laughed, full of excitement. At this point, the live chat was very lively. Tony Stark, hey, no way. That spaceship exploded in space. How could Thor survive? Thor, ha ha, we Asgardians are noble gods, our bodies are not the same as you weak mortals. Stephen Strange, is this the strength of the aliens? It's incredible. Peter Parker, in that case, shouldn't he and Loki, both, survive? Hearing that, Loki's heart shook, and a glimmer of hope sprang up in his heart. As one of the best sorcerers in Asgard, Loki was best at illusion magic. If he wanted to, he could create the perfect illusion of death and make people believe he was dead. But just when Loki's heart was pounding, thinking that his future self was likely to escape with an illusion, Tony's remark was like a pot of cold water splashed on his head. Tony Stark, Peter, asking such a question shows that you definitely weren't paying attention when you were watching the live broadcast just now. Thor, what? What do you mean? Tony Stark, You don't have to be so excited about it. I'm just stating the facts as they are. Tony Stark, just now, in the live broadcast, Thanos said something after killing the future Loki. Do you remember? Loki Odinson, that. As soon as Tony mentioned this, Loki was shocked. A chill ran down his spine. Peter Parker, I remember, Thanos said no resurrections this time. Tony Stark, yes, I think the meaning of this sentence is that Thanos was sure that he did kill Loki. Tony Stark, no matter what Loki does, he can't come back to life after that. Thor: damn, you bastard, how dare you curse my brother? Stephen Strange: I can understand your reluctance to accept it, but from what I've seen so far, Tony's explanation makes a lot of sense. Despite having overwhelming self-esteem and even a bit of arrogance, Strange wasn't one to be unwilling to acknowledge facts. So far, Tony had really shined a bit in answering the questions, enough to impress Strange. Loki wanted to try to retort, but for a moment, he found himself speechless. A deep sense of helplessness, accompanied by fear, surged into his mind like a flood. In the live stream room, Tony looked back at the pale Loki, shook his head gently, and then opened his mouth and shouted, "I choose B." Thor survived, and Loki died. Since the words of Thanos determine Loki's death, then 2 of the 3 answers could be ruled out, leaving one answer, B. Ding. Tony Stark has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding. Tony Stark's answer is correct. Tony Stark gets 100 live broadcast points, which can be used to request the broadcasting of past or future events related to himself. Tony Stark won a random reward. Infinity Gauntlet. The reward has been issued. Infinity Gauntlet. Looking at the huge glove that suddenly appeared in front of him, suspended in midair, Tony's pupil shrank. He instantly recognized it. Isn't this the gauntlet that the purple potato monster was wearing in the live broadcast video? However, when he looked at it carefully, he felt that something was wrong. Thanos's glove appeared to be on his left hand. But this gauntlet in front of him was for the right hand. What? Odin looked at the picture in the lower right corner of the big screen. His heart pounded, and there was a look of disbelief in his eye. Are you kidding? Isn't this the Infinity Gauntlet I placed in Asgard's treasury? Damn it! Odin angrily blew his beard and glared, his forehead was bulging with veins. What's with this inexplicable system? First Gungnir, now the Infinity Gauntlet. This wasn't only taking advantage of Odin. This was also taking his treasures. Too cruel. But no matter how angry Odin was, he still realized that he had no idea how to get into that magical live streaming room. Frowning for a few seconds, Odin suddenly sneered and relaxed. He remembered very clearly that the system had issued an announcement before the live streaming. As long as the 4 people in the live streaming room had answered the questions raised by it, they could freely leave. In other words, the mustached man who got his Infinity Gauntlet would come out of the live streaming room. At that time, it would be time for Infinity Gauntlet to return to its rightful owner. In the different world live broadcast room. Start binding. It has been successfully bound. From now on, Tony Stark will be the sole owner of the Infinity Gauntlet. The reward has been issued. Listening to the system notification's voice, Loki and others all focused their eyes on Tony. And the expressions on their faces were full of surprise and astonishment. Is this taken from the purple potato monster? Peter Parker blinked and couldn't help but exclaim. No. This gauntlet should have nothing to do with Thanos. Tony reached out and carefully took the gauntlet out of its suspended state in midair. But the Infinity Gauntlet, out of its suspension, was surprisingly heavy. Tony was a bit careless and accidentally dropped the gauntlet. What is this thing made of? How come it's so heavy? Looking at the colorful Infinity Gauntlet in his hand, emitting a strange luster, Tony's eyes revealed a strong curiosity. At this time, a deep voice came from his side. This gauntlet is made of Uru metal, which is the ultimate metal in the universe. The crowd turned their heads, only to see Loki's gloomy expression. His eyes were fixed on the Infinity Gauntlet in Tony's hand, and he slowly said, "I remember, when I was a child, I used to follow my father into the treasury. At that time, I saw a pair of identical gloves there." At this point, Loki was in a very bad mood. As a first-class intelligent person, just now, he judged that Tony's explanation was correct in an instant. Out of rationality, Loki knew it was the right answer, but out of emotion, he still didn't want to believe that he would thoroughly die. As a result, because of his hesitation, he missed the valuable Infinity Gauntlet. However, seeing Megatron still eyeing him from Tony's side, even if he borrowed future Loki's courage, he would be too afraid to snatch it. The fear of his impending death and his jealousy towards Tony were mixed together. Loki's heart felt like it was bitten by a snake. In Kamar Taj, Wong and Mordo looked at the picture-in-picture on the big screen and swallowed at the same time. "Master Ancient One, is that really the divine vessel used to carry the Infinity Stones?" Hearing Wong's question, the Ancient One slightly nodded. And at the same time, her mood was by no means calm. Although the Ancient One wasn't very clear about the future of the Infinity War period, she was sure that at this point in time, the Infinity Gauntlet shouldn't have fallen into Tony's hands. "The future has changed." The Ancient One said a few words in her mind. Then, as if she had made up her mind, she spoke to Master Mordo. "Since you can communicate with those people in the live stream room, tell them all the secrets of the Infinity Stones." "Master, can such a secret really be divulged to these ordinary people?" Master Mordo couldn't believe it, his eyes widened. However, looking at the Ancient One's eyes, he lowered his head helplessly. "Master Mordo, Mr. Stark, do you know what that gauntlet you just got is, exactly?" Tony Stark, "Oh, saying that, are you trying to make a deal with me?" Master Mordo, "Humph, you're thinking too much. I'm just obeying the Sorcerer Supreme's orders. Master Mordo, listen to me. When the universe was first created, it was just a void, and then the primordial universe ushered in 6 elemental gems. They are the Infinity Stones." Tony Stark, "What? What kind of pseudoscience are you talking about? How is the primordial universe even a thing?" Master Mordo, "Shut up and listen to me. Each Infinity Stone controls a cosmic origin attribute. Master Mordo, space, reality, power, soul, mind, time. Master Mordo, in the future shown by the live broadcast, Thanos gained the Power Stone and Space Stone, making him the most powerful being in the universe." Thor, "Nonsense, my father is the most powerful in the universe." Master Mordo, "Think what you will. However, just getting the stones won't bring out their full power unless—" Tony Stark, "Unless all 6 stones were embedded in these gauntlets." Master Mordo, "That's right. But I also want to warn you. The power of the Infinity Stones are definitely not something that ordinary humans could bear. Master Mordo, unless you want to commit suicide." Tony Stark, "Ha ha ha ha, I'm even more curious when you say that carrot. At this moment, Tony really had a thought in his mind that could not be contained. He wanted to study and decipher the secrets contained in these gauntlets, as well as try to collect those 6 Infinity Stones. "This gauntlet is too big." "Yes, is it for giants?" "Loki, you said that the gauntlets were made by your father's orders. Is your father a giant?" "Bold, you mortal. How dare you? Wait, you tell that robot to stay away from me. Don't let that monster come near me." In the live streaming room, 4 men surrounded the Infinity Gauntlet, yelling from time to time. In the previous video broadcast, Thanos killed people with the Infinity Gauntlet, which had left a deep impression on them. Just when the discussion was in full swing, the emotionless voice of the system suddenly rang out again. New quiz start. Question: why did Loki launch a suicide attack on Thanos? A. Loki doesn't want to live. He wants to commit suicide by Thanos's hand. B. Loki overestimated his strength and thought he could kill Thanos. C. In order to save Thor, Loki wanted to die with Thanos. D. When Thanos kills people, only half of them die. With Loki dead, Thor could live. Please start answering. Each person in the live streaming room has only one chance to answer. Failure to answer the question will trigger an unknown penalty. Upon hearing the question, the eyes of the other 3 people in the live streaming room were all focused on Loki. Feeling the strange looks from Tony and others, Loki's face turned green and white, and at that time, he actually felt some kind of humiliating public exposure. What the hell? How do I know what happened to the future me? Doing that kind of stupid thing. And at this point, in the chat group, there were people who couldn't help themselves. Thor, nonsense. How could my brother commit suicide? This option is complete nonsense. Stephen Strange, however, you also have to admit that Loki's final stab at Thanos really looked a bit self-destructive. Thor, what do you know? A true warrior, even if he knows he will die, will not hesitate to attack. Tony Stark, that sounds like suicide. Thor, damn it. If I meet you in person, I'm going to beat you up. Peter Parker, don't fight. But honestly, what exactly does that last option mean? It doesn't make any sense. Stephen Strange, Thanos only kills half. Tony Stark, I don't quite understand this one either. Can someone explain? What? In Asgard, seeing the last option on the screen, Odin's body trembled, and the expression on his face instantly changed. After a while, his one eye suddenly showed a trace of sadness. Then, he sighed. Loki, you're such a foolish boy. As the God King of the 9 realms, Odin's insight was naturally unmatched by mortals. He knew all about Thanos and his crazy paranoid behavior. Therefore, Odin quickly understood the profound meaning of this last option and the tragic choice made by Loki. Standing in the hall, Thor also found Odin's look and couldn't help but ask, "Father, what did you say about Loki?" Odin smiled bitterly and whispered, "Thor, you must be kinder to your brother in the future. He did it for you. He sacrificed everything." Listening to Odin's explanation, Thor's eyes gradually widened, and the expression on his face was completely dull, as if he had heard the most unbelievable thing in the world. At this point, everyone in the chat group was still discussing. Tony Stark, that D option is a bit strange, really, but there's so little information about it that we don't even know who the purple potato monster is. Stephen Strange, Master Mordo. Have you heard of Thanos? Master Mordo, I don't know much about this person either. Master Mordo, if you really want to know, you have to ask Wong. Tony Stark, no way. You magicians know something about aliens. Master Mordo, what's so strange about that? Our Sorcerer Supreme is the guardian of the Earth and has fought off alien attacks more than once. Tony Stark, that's incredible. I never knew that space was that dangerous. Tony Stark, then, my plans to build a robot army should be put on the agenda as soon as possible. Peter Parker, ha! Robot army. That's when Thor, the god of thunder, popped back up in the chat group. Thor, Loki. How can you be so stupid? Why would you sacrifice yourself for me? Loki Odinson, what? What are you talking about? Thor, father told me that Thanos is a madman. His purpose is to reduce the population of the universe. Thor, every time he kills a planet's population, he would only kill half of them and let the other half live. Thor, so, in the future, you would take the initiative to die at his hands, so that Thanos wouldn't kill me. Thor's words were tantamount to a sharp thunderclap, stunning everyone in front of the screen. The world actually has this kind of madman. This gauntlet is too big. Yes, is it for giants? Loki, you said that the gauntlets were made by your father's orders. Is your father a giant? Bold, you mortal. How dare you? Wait, you tell that robot to stay away from me. Don't let that monster come near me. In the live streaming room, 4 men surrounded the Infinity Gauntlet, yelling from time to time. In the previous video broadcast, Thanos killed people with the Infinity Gauntlet, which had left a deep impression on them. Just when the discussion was in full swing, the emotionless voice of the system suddenly rang out again. New quiz start. Question: why did Loki launch a suicide attack on Thanos? A. Loki doesn't want to live. He wants to commit suicide by Thanos's hand. B. Loki overestimated his strength and thought he could kill Thanos. C. In order to save Thor, Loki wanted to die with Thanos. D. When Thanos kills people, only half of them die. With Loki dead, Thor could live. Please start answering. Each person in the live streaming room has only one chance to answer. Failure to answer the question will trigger an unknown penalty. Upon hearing the question, the eyes of the other 3 people in the live streaming room were all focused on Loki. Feeling the strange looks from Tony and others, Loki's face turned green and white, and at that time, he actually felt some kind of humiliating public exposure. What the hell? How do I know what happened to the future me? Doing that kind of stupid thing. And at this point, in the chat group, there were people who couldn't help themselves. Thor, nonsense. How could my brother commit suicide? This option is complete nonsense. Stephen Strange, however, you also have to admit that Loki's final stab at Thanos really looked a bit self-destructive. Thor, what do you know? A true warrior, even if he knows he will die, will not hesitate to attack. Tony Stark, that sounds like suicide. Thor, damn it. If I meet you in person, I'm going to beat you up. Peter Parker, don't fight. But honestly, what exactly does that last option mean? It doesn't make any sense. Stephen Strange, Thanos only kills half. Tony Stark, I don't quite understand this one either. Can someone explain? What? In Asgard, seeing the last option on the screen, Odin's body trembled, and the expression on his face instantly changed. After a while, his one eye suddenly showed a trace of sadness. Then, he sighed. Loki, you're such a foolish boy. As the God King of the 9 realms, Odin's insight was naturally unmatched by mortals. He knew all about Thanos and his crazy paranoid behavior. Therefore, Odin quickly understood the profound meaning of this last option and the tragic choice made by Loki. Standing in the hall, Thor also found Odin's look and couldn't help but ask. "Father, what did you say about Loki?" Odin smiled bitterly and whispered. "Thor, you must be kinder to your brother in the future. He did it for you. He sacrificed everything." Listening to Odin's explanation, Thor's eyes gradually widened, and the expression on his face was completely dull, as if he had heard the most unbelievable thing in the world. At this point, everyone in the chat group was still discussing. "Tony Stark, that D option is a bit strange, really, but there's so little information about it that we don't even know who the purple potato monster is. Stephen Strange, Master Mordo. Have you heard of Thanos?" "Master Mordo, I don't know much about this person either. Master Mordo, if you really want to know, you have to ask Wong. Tony Stark, no way. You magicians know something about aliens. Master Mordo, what's so strange about that? Our Sorcerer Supreme is the guardian of the Earth and has fought off alien attacks more than once. Tony Stark, that's incredible. I never knew that space was that dangerous. Tony Stark, then, my plans to build a robot army should be put on the agenda as soon as possible." Peter Parker, ha! Robot army. That's when Thor, the god of thunder, popped back up in the chat group. "Thor, Loki. How can you be so stupid? Why would you sacrifice yourself for me? Loki Odinson, what? What are you talking about? Thor, father told me that Thanos is a madman. His purpose is to reduce the population of the universe. Thor, every time he kills a planet's population, he would only kill half of them and let the other half live. Thor, so, in the future, you would take the initiative to die at his hands, so that Thanos wouldn't kill me." Thor's words were tantamount to a sharp thunderclap, stunning everyone in front of the screen. The world actually has this kind of madman. The otherworldly live streaming room instantly became silent. Tony and the others looked at Loki as if they had just heard the most ridiculous thing in the world. "Tony Stark, hey, Thor, that's just too unbelievable. Could you please explain it clearly?" Thor. "According to my father, Titan, where Thanos came from, fell into the state of resource collapse because of its large population. Thor, so Thanos came up with a crazy idea. That is, to eliminate half of the population on Titan, to alleviate the resource problem. Stephen Strange, wouldn't that be genocide? He really is crazy. Thor, not only that, the guy tried to spread his heresy through the whole universe after destroying half of Titan's population. Peter Parker, spread it through the whole universe. Maybe he wants to. Thor, it means eliminating half the population of the whole universe. Seeing the messages scrolling on the screen. From Asgard to Kamar Taj, countless people gasped. Eliminate half the people in the universe. This shocking news, just like a bombshell, shook their minds blank. Master Mordo's eyes were wide open, and his pupils were sharply contracted. He looked at Master Ancient One and exclaimed, "Master! Will this really happen in the future?" Master Ancient One's expression didn't change. Her eyes slightly narrowed as she calmly said, "The future is ours to create, and since we've been warned about Thanos, someone is bound to stop him." In the square of Kamar Taj, a number of apprentices were gathered here to watch the live stream. Originally, they were all stunned by Thor's words, but when they heard the words of Master Ancient One, most of them felt relieved. At the same time, however, Wong looked back at the Ancient One with a worried look in his eyes. Just now, Master Ancient One didn't directly answer Mordo's question. Tony Stark, Thanos is really crazy. How can an ordinary person think of doing such a thing? Steve Strange, the most terrible thing is that this madman is still thinking that he is some kind of savior and what he is doing is saving the whole universe. Peter Parker, I didn't know there were such terrible lunatics in the universe. Tony Stark, but now I understand. It's precisely because of this madman's paranoia that Loki would do such a thing in the future. Steve Strange, does killing only half, in turn, mean letting the other half go? Peter Parker, so Loki chose to sacrifice himself in exchange for his brother Thor's survival, that's amazing. Loki Odinson, is that a joke? Loki suddenly shouted. His voice was full of anger and confusion. Since childhood, his feelings for Thor were very complicated. Because of his powerful strength and extroverted personality, Thor enjoyed great popularity in the hearts of Odin and the Asgardians. Far above him, Loki. Loki had always been jealous of that. Moreover, he could vaguely feel that Odin's attitude towards him and Thor was somewhat different. Therefore, Loki always wanted to prove to Odin that he was better than Thor. However, in the future displayed on the screen, he actually gave up everything for Thor. Even his own life. What's going on here? From now to the future, what exactly happened to make him do that? Ever since birth, Loki had never been more desperate to know what was going to happen in the future. Wait, predicting the future. Loki's face changed. He suddenly remembered something. It was mentioned in the announcement of the system. As long as the questions were answered successfully, besides random rewards, it would also give out broadcast points. With these live broadcast points, he could request a broadcast about his past or future. Thinking of that, Loki suddenly raised his head. Only then did he realize that the remaining 3 people in the live streaming room were all silently looking at him, their eyes full of emotion. To save his brother, he even volunteered to sacrifice his life. Tony sighed lightly. There was some respect in his tone. This kind of thing is just unimaginable to me. As an only child, Tony was sent to boarding school by his father when he was a kid. Therefore, his affection for his family was actually somewhat lacking. And because of that, for what Loki did, Tony was the most impacted one. Facing Loki with somewhat puzzled eyes, Tony opened his hands and frankly said, "Since it is because of the information provided by your brother that we could determine the correct answer, then, naturally, it should be up to you to answer." Beside him, Peter Parker and Stephen Strange didn't speak, but they had no intention of answering first. Relying on the information provided by someone else's brother and then stealing the brother's answer, Strange, who always had too much pride, couldn't do such a thing. You. Loki took a deep breath, his eyes became a little complicated. But he didn't waste time either. He looked up and answered loudly. "I choose D. When Thanos kills people, only half of them dies. With Loki dead, Thor could live." Ding. Loki Odinson has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding. Loki Odinson's answer is correct. Loki Odinson gets 100 live broadcast points, which can be used to request the broadcasting of past or future events related to himself. Loki Odinson won a random reward. Reward, Sword of the Dutiful Son, Frostman. The reward has been issued. Soon, a blue and white sword that looked like it was forged in ice appeared before Loki's eyes. At the same time, a series of information flooded his mind. Frostman, it is a lonely sword of cold ice, in which thoughts are magnified, souls are reborn in depravity, and disasters overflow in sorrow that cannot be stopped, only destroyed. It is as light as a feather, as cold as ice, and its endless power constantly attracts depraved people to yearn for. However, it favors those extremely miserable people, giving them the power to take revenge on the world and bring about its fall and disaster. Ability 1, Frost. When you hold this sword, you will have the ability to control ice and snow, but the average person simply can't withstand the terrifying freezing air coming from the sword. Ability 2, Drain Life. After killing an enemy, it will absorb the soul of the opponent to strengthen itself. Ability 3, Undead Scourge. When activated, legions of undead will be created from the surrounding environment. Looking at the ice blue sword in front of him, Loki's expression actually became a bit dazed for a while. That answer was actually correct. The answer was correct and gained him the reward. However, Loki's face, surprisingly, didn't show any joy. Instead, it turned gloomy. I actually sacrificed my own life to save that stupid brother. Who would want such a future? Inexplicable anger suddenly rose in Loki's heart. At this moment, he made up his mind. No matter what, he had to change that damn future. Thinking of that, he no longer hesitated and directly stretched out his hand to hold Frostman, which was hovering in front of him. Woo! At the moment when Loki touched the hilt, a cold air suddenly broke out. The temperature in the whole otherworldly live-streaming room seemed to drop by tens of degrees in an instant. It suddenly feels so cold. Peter Parker's face instantly turned pale, and his whole body shivered. Tony and Strange watched from the sidelines as they also sensed the cold air. They were standing further away, but they could feel the cold frozen air. Loki reached directly for the sword. Would he really be okay? Reaching out and holding Frostman's hilt, Loki felt an icy, bone-chilling aura instantly spread throughout his body from his palm. But surprisingly, in the presence of this cold air that could freeze living people into ice sculptures, he not only did not feel uncomfortable but instead felt a sense of comfort. While holding the hilt, Loki understood the true power of this magical sword. Frostman, in the other world called Azeroth, Frostman has slaughtered countless enemies, from knights, mags, and even dragons. The souls of these enemies were all devoured by this magic sword. As long as the owner of the sword possessed enough power, he could completely release the souls of these victims from the sword and transform them into terrifying undead. This is the Scourge. What a powerful magic sword! After returning to his senses, Loki couldn't help but draw in a breath of cold air. His mind was momentarily shaken. To be able to summon the undead, including a dragon, out of thin air, this magic sword was truly terrifying. Controlling the undead, anywhere in 9 realms, was an extremely evil and frightening power. But surprisingly, at this moment, Loki didn't feel repulsed by it at all. After seeing his miserable death in the video, it could be said that Loki had never been as thirsty for power in his life as he was now. Holding a huge sword, Loki looked down and around. He saw that a thick circle of frost had already condensed under his feet, spreading dozens of meters away. Tony and the others were all far away, and their eyes were full of surprise. Mr. Loki, are you all right? Peter Parker gulped, his voice was trembling. Even though it was far away, the chill from Frostman still made him shiver. With a casual nod, Loki looked down at the magic sword in his hands, and for a moment, had the urge to summon a few undead out to have a look. But he finally remembered that in Asgard, Odin and Thor were watching him through the screen. With some regret, this thought was left behind. Suddenly, doubt rose in Loki's heart. What does the other title of this magic sword mean? Sword of the Dutiful Sun. In Asgard, looking at Loki's cold appearance on screen, Odin's brow was slightly furrowed. Loki was actually not his own son, but the son of the king of Jotunheim in 9 realms, the frost giant Laufey. In that year, Odin repelled Laufey's invasion of Earth. Pushing all the way into Jotunheim, in Laufey's palace, he found Loki, who was still a baby, and brought him back to Asgard. No one in Asgard knew about Loki's origins except for Frigga, the Queen Mother. Odin adopted Loki and raised him as his own son. Actually, he had his own purpose. He hoped that Loki would be the king of Jotunheim in the future, and Thor would be the king of Asgard. In this way, these two kingdoms could enjoy eternal peace by virtue of brotherhood. But when he thought of the image of Loki's neck being broken by Thanos on the big screen just now, Odin still felt indescribably sorrowful in his heart. When he adopted Loki, he did have his own selfish motives. However, he didn't want to watch the son who he had been raising for many years, be sacrificed like this. Just as Odin was getting sentimental, his white eyebrows suddenly rose, and his eyes flashed with surprise, which then immediately turned into alarm. The frost giants, they have invaded Asgard's treasury. Crack crack crack. In Asgard's treasury, a guard suddenly noticed that there was frost, rapidly condensing on the ground. But at that moment, a big blue hand suddenly grabbed him, and an ice-condensed blade instantly sliced through the guard's neck. After killing the guards, several blue frost giants simultaneously charged towards the end of the treasury. There, the treasure Odin took from Jotunheim was kept, the casket of ancient winters. But just as one frost giant picked up the casket of ancient winters and turned around to leave, Odin, sitting comfortably on the throne in the great hall, with his eye focused, his right hand clenched into a fist and swung downward. A wall in the treasury suddenly disappeared into thin air. A metal giant with a silver body came out of the space in the wall. This was the Destroyer, Asgard's most terrifying weapon of war. Hearing the sound, a frost giant looked back, his eyes shot out in alarm, and instinctively raised the casket of ancient winters in his hands. But before he could activate the power in the casket of ancient winters, a terrifying ray of annihilation immediately shot out from the Destroyer's head. Swish! Under the sweeping golden light, the 3 frost giants were instantly destroyed, not even a little crumb was left. Sensing the Destroyer had stopped, Odin, who was still on the throne, breathed a sigh of relief. Just now, he was really worried. Could this be a massive invasion by the frost giants? But now, it seemed that it was just a bunch of petty thieves. At that moment, the screen on the hall suddenly flashed with a row of words. At the same time, there was the emotionless voice again. The quiz will take a 5-minute break. Please feel free to rest. Hearing this cold voice, Odin breathed a sigh of relief. Then he looked around the hall and said, "Everyone step down." In Odin's mind, the mysterious system in front of him, as well as the big screen in the air, had given birth to deep fear. No one knew what future events would be exposed on the screen next. These future matters, once all the tens of thousands of Asgardians in the Great Hall saw them, it might not be a good thing. Hearing Odin's command, everyone hesitated and finally bowed their heads to Odin. Then filed out of the hall. Originally, they were frightened by the destruction of Asgard. But after seeing Loki and Thor's fearless fight, everyone's mindset had completely changed. A few minutes later, Odin led Thor into Asgard's treasury. Looking at the bodies of the guards who were frozen to death on the ground, Odin's gaze flickered slightly, while Thor shouted in rage. "These filthy frost giants, I'll make them pay the price." Odin walked to the casket of ancient winters. Looking at the supreme treasure, he faintly said, "The frost giants have paid the price with their lives, the destroyer has performed its duties, and the casket of ancient winters wasn't taken away. The situation isn't bad." "Not bad?" Thor angrily asks. "They broke into the treasury. What would we do if the frost giants snatched any of the powerful artifacts here?" Odin didn't answer Thor's question. He just frowned and pondered. This treasury could be said to be the most heavily guarded and secretive place in Asgard. How on earth did those frost giants break in? Who's behind this? That's when Odin had another unstoppable thought about that uncertain and horrible future. I died. Asgard was destroyed. What kind of enemies will they face in the future? Thinking of that, Odin looked back at Thor, who was still furious, and calmly said, "Everything is fine in the treasury. Let's put this matter aside for now. We'd better hurry back to the main hall first. If there are more videos about the future events on that big screen, it's best not to miss it." In Odin's view, if they wanted to avoid the fate of Asgard's destruction in the future, their greatest hope right now was the future live broadcasts. As soon as Odin mentioned the live broadcast, Thor, who was still angry, immediately fell silent. In his heart, he actually wanted to know why he not only lost Mjolnir but also lost an eye in the future. The two men had just returned to the empty hall. The big screen floating in the air suddenly went dark. Ding! Broadcasting new video. Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Spider-Man, vs. Thanos and his 4 stones. After seeing the title of this video, there was an uproar in the live streaming room and chat group. Even Odin's one eye widened. 4 stones. Thanos, that bastard, in addition to the Power Stone and Space Stone. Did he find 2 more Infinity Stones? Binge. Please leave a review. It will make my day. When the title appeared, the live chat group suddenly boiled up. Peter Parker, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Spider-Man. Who are all these people? How could they beat Thanos? Tony Stark, who knows? I've never heard of them. Master Mordo, 4 stones. This madman could collect 4 stones. Terrifying. After getting the 4 stones, how much would his strength expand? Thor, no matter how strong Thanos becomes, I will kill him. Just as everyone's minds were thinking of various things, a brand new video began to play on the screen in front of them. Thanos coming out of a space portal into a barren wasteland. Soon. A man's voice rang out next to him. Oh yeah. You're much more of a THA numbers. Looking at Doctor Strange, who was sitting on one side, Thanos was still expressionless. He calmly said, I take it that Moore is dead. Still, he accomplished his mission. Doctor Strange coldly said, you may regret that. He brought you face to face with the master of the mystic arts. What? Looking at the face with the vicissitudes of life in the video, Stephen Strange's eyes were wide open, and his mind was filled with confusion. I would actually become a master in the future. This is so exciting. However, in Kamar Taj and Asgard, the video on the screen caused an even stronger shock. That's the Eye of Agamotto. Wong gawked at Doctor Strange on screen. He was so full of shock that even his face had gone numb. He saw the odd eye-like amulet hanging right below Doctor Strange's neck. It was exactly the same as the one hanging on the Ancient One's body. And beside him, Master Mordo also had his mouth wide open. His whole body was frozen in place, unable to make a sound. Agamotto was the first sorcerer supreme on Earth. Since the establishment of Kamar Taj, only the sorcerer supreme of each generation were qualified to carry this artifact named after him. Stephen Strange, however, was still just a budding apprentice. He couldn't even use the most basic portal magic. How can such a person become the Sorcerer Supreme? Besides, where was the Master? Ancient One. I see. Master Ancient One gently sighed. Suddenly, there was a hint of relief in her eyes. It seemed that in the future, she could finally put down the burden on her shoulders. Right now, in Asgard, Odin's pupil suddenly contracted, and his face looked extremely grave. It's the reality stone. Odin could clearly see that the Infinity Gauntlet on Thanos' left hand had indeed been equipped with 4 stones. And that scarlet gem was undoubtedly the ether, the reality stone. Thousands of years ago, Odin fought against the Dark Elves who controlled the ether. Therefore, it could be said that he knew this stone extremely well. This was a terrifying power that could modify reality. Thanos, where do you think he brought you? Doctor Strange expressionlessly said, let me guess, your home. There was a smile on Thanos' face, it was. He raised his left hand. The reality gem on Infinity Gauntlet lit up in a scarlet glow. Under the red glow, the environment around Thanos instantly changed. The dusty sky turned blue. The ruins on the ground were transformed into turquoise and green garden. And it was beautiful. Thanos said solemnly. Titan was like most planets, too many mouths, not enough to go around. And when we faced extinction, I offered a solution. Doctor Strange asked, genocide. Thanos didn't deny it, but random. Dispassionate, fair to rich and poor alike. They called me a madman, and what I predicted came to pass. Doctor Strange sarcastically added, congratulations. You're a prophet. Thanos deadpanned, I'm a survivor. Doctor Strange corrected, who wants to murder trillions. Thanos continued, with all 6 stones, I could simply snap my fingers. They would all cease to exist. I call that mercy. Watching up to this point, all the viewers in front of the screens were shocked. Tony Stark, does this purple potato monster mean that he can wipe out half of the people in the universe with a snap of his fingers? Tony Stark, that's too insane, isn't it? Master Mordo, if Thanos could really collect 6 Infinity Stones, then he might really be able to do it. Thanos. In Asgard, Odin's mind jolted. Even when he heard the news of Asgard's imminent destruction earlier, he didn't feel this horrified. Thanos' purpose in collecting the Infinity Stones was actually to wipe out half of all the living beings in the universe with his own hands. This was crazy to the extreme. Thanos, with vicissitude, added. The hardest choices require the strongest will. Doctor Strange stood up and waved his hands, a magical shield took shape in his hands. I think you'll find our will equal to yours. Our. Thanos instinctively looked up, only to see the wreckage of a satellite falling from the sky at an alarming speed and slamming down on him with a boom. But with the Power Stone shining, the huge wreckage was instantly blown to pieces by Thanos. Then, on Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet, the light of the Scarlet Reality Stone lit up once again. Thanos shouted, and with a wave of his left hand, the large amount of debris was actually instantly transformed into countless strange birds, scattering in all directions. Seeing this scene, the live chat became active again. Peter Parker, geez, what's going on? How did those pieces of wreckage turn into birds? Master Mordo, this is the power of the reality stone. It is said that those who master this power could change reality by their own will. Stephen Strange, modifying reality, how is that possible? Is that magic? Master Mordo, magic can't do this. This is the most primitive power in the universe. The video continued. Doctor Strange kept releasing magic spells. The rest of the group joined forces to attack Thanos, but they weren't able to inflict any fatal damage to him. Seeing that Thanos was about to use the Infinity Stones again, Doctor Strange quickly gave orders to his cloak. Don't let him close his fist. As if possessing intelligence, the cloak behind Doctor Strange suddenly flew up on its own, instantly charging to Thanos' left hand, completely surrounding his left palm that had the Infinity Gauntlet on it. Thanos had just torn off the cloak wrapped around his left hand when countless miniature missiles suddenly descended from the sky. Boom! With a deafening bang, Thanos' entire body was surrounded by flames. Good man, that robot. No, it's mechanical armor. Looking at the steel armor falling from the sky and constantly launching missiles on the screen, Tony Stark's pupils contracted, and his eyes could not move away. As a talented engineer, he was instantly attracted to the gold and red armor. Besides, Tony was even more curious about who the man in the iron suit was. Who on earth could make this kind of mechanical armor that could be called works of art? Is it the Iron Man mentioned by the system before? Although Thanos was surrounded by a sea of fire. But when his left hand reached out, the overwhelming flames were actually cleanly sucked up by the Infinity Gauntlet in his hand. Immediately after, blazing fire erupted from the Infinity Gauntlet, turning into a torch that struck Iron Man just in time, sending his body flying far away. After knocking Iron Man out, Thanos easily struck down Spider-Man. Even though he was hit by another flying machine that fell from the sky, he still stood up. Thor, damn it, I wish I was there. Just let me hold Mjolnir, and I promise I can break Thanos' head in one hit. Loki Odinson, you'd better stop mentioning your hammer. Didn't you see that in the previous live broadcast, you not only lost your hammer, but you even lost one eye? Thor. My hammer. My eyes. How can this be? Seeing that Thanos was almost unstoppable, Doctor Strange waved his hands and released several belts of crimson light. He firmly bound Thanos' left hand. That's crimson bands of Cyttorak. Master Mordo's expression changed, he was deeply shocked. This crimson bands was not only extremely difficult to perform but also required the use of the crimson magic power of the interdimensional demon god Cyttorak, who lived in the crimson cosmos, in order to complete. Dealing with the demon gods of other dimensions was not only difficult but also incredibly dangerous. Even Master Mordo himself wouldn't dare to take that risk. And the screen Doctor Strange reached out and was able to release several crimson bands that shackled Thanos. It could be seen that his magic attainments had been perfected. Who would have thought that the current budding apprentice would become so powerful in the future? Thanks to the joint efforts of Doctor Strange and others, Thanos was finally successfully restrained. They even used an alien girl to take control of Thanos' mind, forcing him into a half-conscious slumber. Seeing this, the crowd in front of the screen finally let out a sigh of relief. Peter Parker, gosh, this should be considered a win now. Master Mordo, no, they still have to take the gauntlet from his hand first. That Infinity Gauntlet is the source of this purple potato monster's power. Just when everyone thought that the overall situation had been decided, the situation in the video suddenly changed again. Spider-Man was desperately tugging at the gauntlet on Thanos' left hand. But no one expected that suddenly, there was a man who snapped and attacked Thanos in a frenzy. Although he was later pulled away by Iron Man, Thanos still regained consciousness. Peter Parker, damn, who is that guy? Why did he wake up Thanos at this time? Thor, damn it, this idiot. If I see him, I'll kill him. After casually repelling the crowd, Thanos raised his palm to the giant moon in the sky and pulled it down with force. Boom! Thanos shattered the crust of the moon's surface under the purple glow of the Power Stone. Countless crust fragments turned into a large number of meteorites. With amazing momentum, they burst into the atmosphere and fell down like a meteor shower towards Iron Man and the others. Oh my god! Looking at the scene on the screen, seemingly like the end of the world, Peter Parker's body shivered, even goosebumps came out. And beside him, Tony and the others sucked in a breath of cold air. No matter Loki, Thor, or Master Mordo, they were all shocked by the scene before them. Terrifying. Horrifying. This kind of earth-destroying, devastating power was beyond anything they had ever heard of or seen. Thanos actually created a meteor shower out of thin air. This is unbelievable. The flame-enveloped meteorite cut through the sky and dyed the sky red. After these meteorites fell to the ground, it caused an earth-shattering explosion. Even the planet shook. Seeing such a terrible scene, almost everyone in the audience felt chills down their backs. That was a shock. Utterly mind-blowing. No good. Seeing the Iron Man on screen, smashed by a huge meteorite and being crashed into the ground. Tony gulped. Suddenly his heartbeat accelerated. This cool-looking high-tech armor. Can it withstand such a terrible attack? I got you, I got you. Spider-Man's hand sprayed out spider silk and saved several people. I'm sorry, I can't remember anybody's names. But seeing the scene where the sky was collapsing in front of him, Spider-Man's tone of voice almost carried a hint of crying. This young man is awesome, he's really saving people. Staring at Spider-Man on the screen without blinking, Peter Parker's eyes revealed a trace of admiration. Still thinking about saving people in such a situation, this young man in the spider costume was definitely a real hero. In this apocalyptic backdrop, Doctor Strange descended from the sky and gazed at Thanos with a serious face, taking a battle-ready stance. It looks like he was prepared to fight this terrifying mad titan by himself. In Kamar Taj, the group of apprentices looked at the scene on the screen. There were many who whispered in astonishment. No way, what's Steven doing? He's alone. Is this suicide? Yes. Just now, a lot of people went at it together and still couldn't beat that purple monster. Master Mordo took a deep breath. The look on his face was strained. To be fair, Doctor Strange's actions in the live broadcast video had greatly exceeded his imagination. However, this opponent was really too strong. Wouldn't it be too risky for him to go one-on-one? Even the fan in Master Ancient One's hand stopped. There was a hint of anticipation in her eyes. Stephen Strange, in the future. How far have you grown? At this time. Without saying a word, Doctor Strange launched an attack. Doctor Strange's hands gathered a magic circle and pressed down. Gold lightning bolts kept jumping, dissolving everything that touched the ground into lava and charged straight towards Thanos. Such powerful bolts of Baltic. A few moments of incredulity passed through Master Wong's gaze. He has mastered such powerful elemental magic. What kind of training has the future Steven undergone? Thanos suddenly jumped into the air, dodging Doctor Strange's bolts of Baltic. With one punch from his left hand, the energy of the Power Stone transformed into a purple shockwave that shattered a boulder in the air. Doctor Strange's hands pushed the space in front of him that suddenly turned into a mirror dimension, abruptly blocking the impact of the Power Stone. Then, the mirror dimension moved forward like a wall, pushing towards Thanos. Boom! The Power Stone on Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet once again burst forth with a purple glow, shattering the mirror dimension in front of him with a single punch. Then, Thanos used the Space Stone on his Infinity Gauntlet to absorb all the mirror dimension fragments that were scattered. He then turned them into a black hole-like space vortex, rushing back towards Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange, with a wave of his hands, conjured up a huge golden magic shield. The two energies clashed together and exploded. And in the moment of explosion, the massive energy surprisingly turned into countless transparent butterflies, flying in all directions. At this moment in Kamar Taj Square, those apprentices were all frozen in place as they watched the exciting spectacle unfold. Everyone's eyes were riddled with deep shock. One by one, their mouths were wide open, and they looked terrified. This man, really Stephen Strange? How is that possible? How could his magical mastery be so powerful? I've never even heard of those spells. Where did he learn them? Looking at Doctor Strange, who fluently unleashed powerful magic in the video, the apprentices could hardly believe their eyes. That's the hoary host of Hoggoth. Seeing that Doctor Strange easily shattered the spatial vortex attack from Thanos, Master Mordo's eyes widened. He couldn't help but gasp. The last piece of the golden shield released by Doctor Strange was a super advanced level spell that combined energy and illusion. Only such a top-level spell could withstand the attack released by Thanos using the space gem. Previously, Master Mordo had always been very optimistic about Stephen Strange and thought he had great potential. But the magic displayed by Doctor Strange in the video, even he, a senior sorcerer, was pale in comparison. This live broadcasted video was impacting Mordo's heart. It even made him feel it was a little surreal for a while. Is this really me? In the live streaming room, Doctor Strange's eyes were wide open. He was stunned as he stared at the screen in front of him, with a face of disbelief that couldn't be concealed. Looking at the splendid magic spells on screen, even his eyes were blurred. I could be that powerful in the future. That's incredible. As everyone knew, he hadn't even mastered basic spells yet. Strange, my judgment was correct. Master Ancient One's folding fan waved slowly. The corners of her mouth showed a smile of approval. The video continued. Doctor Strange's body suddenly manifested countless arms, just like the thousand-armed goddess of mercy. Then, his single body instantly turned into hundreds, scattered in all directions, completely surrounding Thanos. This spell. Images of Icon. Wong murmured in a low voice, his tone full of awe. Hundreds of Doctor Strange raised their right hand at the same time, releasing a strong magic rope that tied both of Thanos' arms securely. Thanos was having a hard time getting rid of the countless ropes, but suddenly, two stones from the Infinity Gauntlet glowed at the same time. One was the Power Stone, and the other was the Soul Stone. Doctor Strange's images of Icon were so magical that it was impossible to see which one was his real body by ordinary means. However, the existence of the Soul Stone allowed Thanos to penetrate the illusion and attack his original body. After all, No matter how many illusions there were, Doctor Strange only had one soul. Under the purple shock wave of the Infinity Gauntlet, the countless Doctor Strange illusions in the air instantly fell apart and disappeared, leaving only one. Doctor Strange stumbled in the air and barely managed to maintain his balance. At this moment, Thanos grabbed the air and actually pulled Doctor Strange's body over. Holding Doctor Strange's neck with his hand, Thanos coldly said, "You're full of tricks, wizard." Viciously yanking the Eye of Agamotto from Doctor Strange, Thanos took one look at it and sneered, "But you've never once chosen your greatest weapon." Pa! Thanos's right hand squeezed and crushed the Eye of Agamotto. It scattered in the wind. Surprisingly, it was completely empty inside. There was no sign of the Time Stone at all. A fake. Thanos threw Doctor Strange out with a single swing of his left hand. Doctor Strange's body rolled far away on the ground, and he passed out. Thanos raised his hand and was about to finish off Doctor Strange with the Infinity Gauntlet. Suddenly, a mechanical device shot over and restrained his left hand, making it impossible to close it. "You throw another moon at me. I'm gonna lose it." A gold and red battle armor descended from the sky and landed on the ground with a loud thud. What? This voice? Looking at the almost unscathed gold-red armor in the video, Tony Stark's heart jolted, his pupils suddenly shrank, and he almost yelled out. Why does this voice sound so familiar? Does it mean the person in the battle suit is? That's when Thanos spat out the person's name. "Stark. You know me." Iron Man was a little surprised. "I do." Thanos had a small, high-minded smile on his face. "You're not the only one cursed with knowledge." Seeing this, Loki, Strange, and Peter Parker all focused on Tony Stark. The eyes of these three were all filled with astonishment and surprise. The person who operated that battle suit was actually the mustache guy in front of them. And that Thanos actually thought that highly of him. What's this guy's story? It's me. It's really me. Ha ha. A surge of joy swept through his body. Tony raised his head and laughed out loud in excitement. Sure enough. Who else can make such a beautiful and powerful battle suit except for a genius? The video continued. Several miniature missiles were released from Iron Man's back, which instantly bombarded Thanos, causing a violent explosion. Iron Man dashed forward at the right time. His two limbs instantly transformed into a battering ram-like weapon and launched a fierce attack on Thanos. Boom! It drove Thanos back. Although he suffered a heavy blow, Thanos didn't show any weakness. His hand reached out and tore off Iron Man's face armor. Then, Thanos reached out and tore off the mechanical restraint device on the Infinity Gauntlet and shot out a blazing purple light with one lift of his hand. Boom! Iron Man's arm instantly turned into a huge shield, blocking his face, blocking the shock wave of the Power Stone. Seeing this, even Odin, on Asgard's throne, showed a bit of surprise in his one eye. This was the attack of the Power Stone. How strong is the armor on this, mortal? Iron Man's body shook. Deflecting the shock wave, he then sprinted towards Thanos, stomping his left hand on the ground with a flying kick. Immediately afterward, Iron Man's fist turned into a giant high-tech hammer with a bluish glow and viciously slammed into Thanos' face. Bang! Thanos staggered from the blow. He stretched out his right hand and touched his face and subsequently gazed at it. It was a drop of purple blood. Fighting until now, someone finally made him bleed. At this moment, the video finally stopped, as if an invisible hand had pressed the pause button. But even though the footage was paused, all the people in front of their screens still felt a great shock. Thanos, who easily knocked down Thor and Hulk, crushed Doctor Strange, and looked almost invincible, was actually wounded by an ordinary human. But this was the first time Thanos had been injured since he appeared. Sitting on the throne, Odin breathed a sigh of relief. Remarkable human. Being able to reach this point with Thanos, who has 4 Infinity Stones, could be described as a mortal body comparable to the gods. Mr. Tony, your battle suit is amazing. Peter Parker looked at Tony Stark. His voice trembled with excitement. As a high school student, he was actually very interested in science. Therefore, Peter Parker was more aware of the power of the armor on screen than ordinary people. This kind of armor could freely transform into a variety of weapons. It was as if it was alive. Ha ha, does that even need to be said? Tony blushed a little but smiled with pride. Seeing the amazing nanotech armor on screen, the scientist's soul in Tony's heart was also burning up. If he weren't confined in this otherworldly live stream room, he would have rushed into his lab and tried to bring this battle suit to life. Thor, a mortal could actually hurt Thanos. What kind of divine weapon are you using? Tony Stark, what divine weapon? I used the battle suit I made. Thor, impossible, how can mortal weapons hurt that mad titan? Thor, could it be that you're not an ordinary mortal, but an offspring of some kind from the god of forging? Tony Stark, ha ha ha, I Tony don't know any gods. Happy smiley. Looking at the screen, Thanos half kneeling on the ground, with one hand being stepped on by Iron Man, while his face was bleeding, Tony's heart was incomparably relieved. Sure enough, no matter how bad this purple potato monster was, as long as this genius made a move, he could immediately turn the tide. At this time, the system's cold voice rang out in the live stream room. Quiz start. Did Tony Stark defeat Thanos in this battle? As soon as this question came out, Thor started shouting in the live chat group. Thor, no way, how can Thanos be defeated by this mortal? Thor, that damn purple potato monster, even if he's going to die, he should die at my hands. Tony Stark, this question isn't simple. Since the future me can injure that purple potato monster, of course, I can also kill him. Tony Stark, so my answer is that I won. I defeated Thanos. Stephen Strange, Stark, you are still a little too arrogant. In the otherworldly live stream room, Tony Stark raised his head and answered without hesitation. Tony, who had always been confident, would never consider the possibility of losing. Moreover, if he looked at the picture in front of him, he really had the upper hand. Ding. Tony Stark has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding. Tony Stark's answer is incorrect. Random penalty imposed. Erasing 1/3 of Iron Man's shares in Stark Industries. Implement immediately. What? I actually lost. Tony's eyes widened. The original gaze, full of confidence, instantly froze. There was a horrifying wave in his heart. At most, the stock will go up or down. How can it be erased? If Tony was originally in complete control of Stark Industries after losing 1/3 of the shares, he could only be a shareholder now. But compared to that, what scared Tony the most was the future. If he really lost to that purple potato monster in the future, wouldn't he lose his life? Seeing this, Loki was about to answer, but to his surprise, there was someone next to him who reacted faster. The fight was lost, Tony Stark lost to Thanos? Ding. Stephen Strange has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding. Stephen Strange's answer is correct. You. Tony looked back at Strange, and the expression on his face was extremely ugly. Looking at Tony's gloomy face, Strange shook his head. You're too arrogant, just like I used to be. Looking down at his hands, Strange also sighed in secret. He didn't really realize how arrogant he used to be until he was seriously injured, his career was completely ruined, and even his life almost fell apart. Stephen Strange gets 100 live broadcast points, which can be used to request the broadcasting of past or future events related to himself. Stephen Strange won a random reward, the horse talisman of the 12 talismans. 12 talismans. Looking at the octagonal rune stone with a horse image engraved on it, Strange's eyes were filled with curiosity. But at that moment, he suddenly felt a surge of energy from the horse talisman that spread throughout his body in an instant. Under the influence of this energy, his hands, which had been trembling non-stop for years, gradually calmed down. My hands. Is this an illusion? Looking at his hands with disbelief, Strange's face was full of shock. He almost thought he was dreaming. Not to mention modern medicine, even Master Ancient One failed to cure his hands. How can this little talisman have such powerful magic? At that moment, a series of messages suddenly appeared in Strange's mind. Horse talisman, eliminate all abnormal external forces in the body, and get rid of all illnesses and injuries. Removing the harmful abnormal influence, to return to a normal state and expel the undesirable external forces from the body. It is able to remove all disturbances and restore. It is also able to restore any material that has been damaged to full quality, representing restoration to the point of perfection. This horse talisman can actually restore all matter to its perfect state. This is unbelievable. Stunned by the message in his head, Strange sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at the talisman in his hand with a different gaze. And just as he froze in place, the video restarted. Thanos' left hand pulled hard and immediately pulled Iron Man, who was standing on his arm, to turn and flip several times in the air, and fell to the ground. Iron Man hadn't reacted yet, and Thanos had already rushed forward. A punch was thrown directly at Iron Man's face. Bang! 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 Punch after punch, like a bombardment, smashing into Iron Man, making him feel dizzy. Reaching out and grabbing Iron Man's head, lifting him into the air, the power gem on Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet lets out a glow. A single blow sent Iron Man flying. Iron Man rolled to the ground. His armor was damaged in many places, and even his head was exposed. However, due to the super high performance of the nano battle suit, those parts that weren't damaged began to flow like water, trying to repair the broken areas. Seeing Thanos getting closer and closer, Iron Man fiercely gritted his teeth and raised his hands to release golden rays. But Thanos just held up the Infinity Gauntlet and blocked all the rays shot by Iron Man. Walking all the way to Iron Man while blocking the rays, Thanos raised his fist and slammed down. Iron Man forcefully took Thanos' punch. Then, the nano battle suit on his body gathered on his right hand, turning it into a sharp short blade and stabbing it at Thanos in desperation. Unexpectedly, Thanos' huge body was extremely agile. He dodged Iron Man's attack with one move. Thanos reached out and grabbed Iron Man's blade, breaking it off effortless and then stabbing it back at him. Due to the long battle, Iron Man's battle suit has long been riddled with holes, and Thanos' blow happened to stab a place without battlesuit protection. Goo! With a miserable shout, Iron Man's abdomen was suddenly pierced by his short blade. Iron Man was filled with astonishment. The strength in his body was rapidly lost, and he took 2 steps backward. He involuntarily collapsed and sat down on the ruins. Seeing this scene, Tony Stark frowned, and his expression grew gloomy. This purple potato monster was too powerful. How on earth can I beat him? At this moment, the video on the screen suddenly paused. The emotionless voice of the system rang again. Ding. New quiz starts. Question: who rescued Iron Man from Thanos and by what means? Hearing this question, Loki secretly frowned and glanced at Tony Stark again. It seems that this mustached guy isn't going to die and still would be saved in the end. Damn it, why don't I have such good luck? He recalled the previous video, the scene where his future self was choked to death by Thanos. Loki felt extremely depressed. Thor: Loki, what are you thinking? The answer is obvious. Loki Odinson: what? You know the answer. Thor: ha 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 ha, do you have to ask? Who else can defeat Thanos and save all of you except for me? Upon hearing this, Loki grimaced at first, but his expression soon became grave. According to the information revealed in the previous question, Thor actually survived. And according to his silly character, he would certainly take revenge on Thanos. From the video, Tony had been completely defeated, Doctor Strange had been seriously injured and fainted, and the rest of the ragtag group couldn't be counted on. In this case, they could only hope that Thor would come to the rescue. Thinking that Strange had just stolen the answer because he was a little slow, Loki didn't hesitate and directly answered. Thor came to the rescue and saved Iron Man. Ding. Loki Odinson's answer is incorrect. Random penalty imposed. Erasing 1/3 of Loki Odinson's magic powers. Implement immediately. Damn it, was wrong. It's all that stupid brother's fault. Feeling that the magic in the body was deprived again, Loki's expression suddenly became ugly. Seeing this, Stephen Strange shook his head slightly and tried to answer. It should be that Doctor Strange woke up and used magic to save Tony. Ding. Stephen Strange's answer is incorrect. Random penalty imposed. Erasing half of Stephen Strange's live broadcast points. Implement immediately. What? Can live points also be erased? Strange's mouth was wide open, and his expression was dumbfounded. He answered correctly twice before and after and got 200 live points, but now there were only 100 left. Looking at Loki and Strange's wretched appearance, Tony coldly said, I don't need others to save me. I think I must have saved myself. Ding. Tony Stark's answer is incorrect. Random penalty imposed. Erasing 1/3 of Iron Man's shares in Stark Industries. Implement immediately. What the hell? Tony gritted his teeth and revealed a hint of turmoil on his face. This is wrong, and that is also wrong. What is the correct answer? At this point, 3 of the 4 people in the broadcast had failed to answer, and the only one left was Peter Parker. Thinking for a moment, Peter weakly answered. It may be that all those who were there joined hands, and together they repelled Thanos and rescued Mr. Stark. Ding. Peter Parker's answer is incorrect. Random penalty imposed. Name your favorite girl in public, and repeat it 10 times. What? Is there such a punishment? Peter was dumbfounded. Instinctively, he put his hand over his mouth. But, driven by an unimaginable force, he still involuntarily opened his mouth and said, "My favorite girl is Gwen Stacy. It's Gwen Stacy. It's Gwen." Watching Peter blush while he kept shouting, Tony shook his head and chuckled lightly. "It's nice to be young." While Loki was beside him, muttering, "What kind of punishment is this? I was deprived of 2/3 of my magic." When Peter finally finished shouting, Tony and Strange looked at each other and saw the hesitation in each other's eyes. Now, it seemed that no one could answer this question. What are we going to do next? At that moment, the voice of the system suddenly rang out again. Ding! The 4 people in the live streaming room have answered incorrectly. Activating emergency plan. Start inviting new people to join the live stream room. Searching. Confirmed newcomer. Wanda Maximoff. Invite to join. Under the eyes of Tony and others, a girl of 14 or 15 years old suddenly appeared beside them. Where is this? What's going on? When the girl first appeared, she was still puzzled, looking from left to right. She didn't seem to understand her situation. But soon, her eyes focused on Tony. Looking at Tony, the young Wanda's eyes turned red. She pounced and clawed at him. "Tony Stark! I'll kill you!" "Hey! What are you doing? Wait! Megatron, don't attack!" Suddenly, the little girl pounced on him. Tony was overwhelmed for a while. "Ah! Don't stop me!" He had to stop Megatron while he had to subdue Wanda. His hands were scratched with several bloodstains. Seeing that, Strange shook his head. His right hand pointed and instantly conjured a golden rope out of thin air. It firmly subdued the young girl. In Kamar Taj, Master Mordo's pupils shrank. His heart was shocked. This magic rope wasn't a profound spell, but he had only shown it to Strange once before. Did he learn it that way? Successfully casting the spell, Strange was also slightly stunned and couldn't help but look at his own hands. He could feel that after his hands were healed by the horse talisman, his spiritual state was somehow elevated as well. The spells that he couldn't understand were now as easy as breathing for him, and he could perform them at will. Damn you! Tony Stark, you devil! I'll curse you to the day I die. Bound by magic ropes, Wanda's face flushed bright red as she stared at Tony and cursed. Seeing her like this, Tony scratched his head in distress. "Little girl, I'm pretty sure I've never seen you before. Why do you hate me that much?" Wanda said with hatred. "It's you, your missile killed my parents." Missile. Tony's face darkened as soon as he heard it. Stark Industries was a munitions company, and selling missiles was naturally part of the business. And if the girl's parents were really killed by the missile he invented, then this hatred, he didn't know how to resolve. In this awkward silence, Loki's brisk voice suddenly rang out. "Little lady, I think I already know what's going on." Loki pointed to Tony and simply said, "I know you want to take revenge on this man. But, you also saw this huge robot." Wanda had almost lost her senses because of her anger, but now she was tied up and calmed down a bit. Looking at Megatron, who was 10 meters tall and emitted a terrifying sense of oppression, she couldn't help but shiver. Cold sweat broke out on her back. If such a mechanical monster wanted to kill her, it was almost the same as crushing an ant to death. Seeing this, Loki spoke with a sly smile. "So, little girl, you can't hurt him at all, but His finger turned to the big screen in front of them. Through this screen, the owner of this space will ask you a question. As long as you can answer correctly, you will have a chance to get an unimaginable reward. Maybe, it can help you get revenge. Hearing Loki's voice that sounded like the whispers of the devil, Tony's face slightly changed. However, he didn't know what to say. Thor, brother, you really haven't changed at all, still so cunning. Loki Odinson, oh, my dear brother, everything I do is just to obtain freedom. Peter Parker, I don't think getting revenge like this is a good thing. Loki Odinson, what do you know, kid? Her parents were killed. Can you resolve this hatred with a few words? Peter Parker. After listening to Loki's sinister words, Wanda calmed down and looked up at the big screen in the live broadcast room. At this time, the screen replayed the great battle on Titan. This earth-shattering battle stunned Wanda, even her eyeballs popped out. Especially when Thanos broke Iron Man's helmet, revealing Tony's face. It was a shock to her, and she couldn't help but gasp. It turns out that Tony Stark is so powerful. How could she avenge her parents? When the system finally asked her the same question, Wanda was stunned, unable to say a word for a while. While in Kamar Taj, Master Ancient One stared at the young Wanda on screen, and suddenly an incredible thought sprang up in her heart. I see. Strange, is that what the future has in mind for you? The Ancient One gently sighed and spoke to Master Mordo, who was standing beside her. You tell the girl for me, the correct answer is. What? Mordo was dumbfounded. His mouth was wide open in disbelief. Master Mordo, young girl. Wanda. Listen. Doctor Strange handed over the Time Stone in exchange for Tony Stark's life. Stephen Strange, are you kidding? How can that be the correct answer? Master Mordo, don't ask me, this is what the Ancient One asked me to say. Master Mordo, the Master may be afraid that none of you could answer correctly. If you are trapped in that space, you will never get out. That's why she is giving you advice. Stephen Strange, Master Ancient One. Did she? In a state of confusion, Wanda still heard Mordo's guidance. Wanda opened her mouth without thinking, followed suit, and answered. Soon, the system responded. Ding. Wanda Maximoff has answered. The quiz system will rule. Ding. Wanda Maximoff's answer is correct. Wanda Maximoff gets 100 live broadcast points, which can be used to request the broadcasting of past or future events related to herself. Wanda Maximoff won a random reward. Zatsuki Kaguya's bloodline. Zatsuki. What kind of name is that? It sounds so strange. Young Wanda's eyes were wide with confusion. Just then, strange energy descended from the sky and was violently infused into her body. Ah! Young Wanda screamed and suddenly fell to her knees. How are you doing? Peter Parker was shocked and rushed forward to check on her. He had just rushed to Wanda's side, and his eyes immediately went wide with shock. Wanda's pale golden hair was turning white at speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, she turned into a girl with silvery white hair. What's going on here? Could this reward be injuring her? Steve Strange frowned and hastily withdrew the magic rope he had released. Just when everyone was surprised, Wanda slowly raised her head. At the sight of her face, Peter Parker's pupil shrank, and he could hardly believe his eyes. He saw that Wanda's original blue eyes turned completely white. At first glance, it was almost like a cataract patient. But when he looked closely, he found that her pair of white eyes were clear, without the slightest hint of miscellaneous colors. Instead of making people feel weird, it gave them a sense of unusual charm. And the strangest thing was that her eyes were actually faintly emitting a light blue glow, and something like a nebula was faintly visible at the pupil's edge. My head hurts. What happened just now? With her hands on her head, Wanda knelt on the ground, her eyes filled with intense confusion. At this time, a series of messages suddenly appeared in her mind. Zatsuki Kaguya bloodline. As the mother of chakra and the god of creation in the Shinobi world, Zatsuki Kaguya is the originator of all eye techniques. Having Kaguya's bloodline means infinite possibilities and the chance to awaken any kind of eye technique and bloodline limit. Just now, your primary Bakugan has already appeared, and it is beginning to evolve into Tensogun. What? Eye technique? Tensogun. What are these? Wanda covered her head. She truly looked confused. However, although she couldn't understand the meaning of the messages, Wanda had an "I don't understand it, but I know it's something amazing" feeling. Does it mean that I have superpowers now? Just like those main characters in movies or cartoons? As soon as this idea came to mind, Wanda immediately realized that her vision had changed. Now, if she concentrated, she could see everything in front of her and behind her, even from a great distance. This is my superpower. It's incredible. After taking a deep breath, Wanda's eyes turned to Tony Stark, who was standing not far away, looking at her with a curious face. Stared at by Wanda's flawless white eyes, Tony suddenly felt the hair on his back stood on end, as if he had been stared at by some beast. Immediately afterward, he saw Wanda extend her right hand towards him, and then an invisible pool came out of thin air, pulling his body forward. What the hell is this? Tony's face paled, and his hands flailed as he tried to control his body. At that moment, the system's emotionless voice rang. Sensing violent conflict in the live streaming room. Enabling safe mode. In the safe mode, no member in the live streaming room can hurt or influence others in any way. Just as the system's voice sounded, Tony immediately felt that the gravitational force imposed on his body instantly disappeared. Oops. However, due to inertia, he still had to take several steps forward to stabilize his body. Tony's shock was really significant. He looked at Wanda, who was kneeling on the ground with a horrified face, his scalp tingle, and he couldn't help but exclaim out loud. This is gravitational force. You awakened a superpower that controls gravity. What's going on? How come my powers don't work anymore? Wanda's eyes were surrounded by white meridians, seemingly in a desperate effort, which surprisingly looked a little scary. But after trying for a while and finding no effect, she had no choice but to give up. Damn it, Tony Stark, someone will save you in the future. I didn't think someone would save you here. Wanda got up from the ground in a huff, her face flushed with anger. With her pure white eyes and hair, she looked a little cute. Loki frowned and raised his right hand to unleash a spell, only to find that nothing happened. Safe mode. This is an anti-magic field, right? At this time, the image on screen started to move again. Thanos stretched out his hand, held down Iron Man's head, and said, "You have my respect, Stark. When I'm done, half of humanity will still be alive. I hope they remember you." Just as Thanos lifted the Infinity Gauntlet to get rid of Iron Man, a voice rang out next to him. "Stop." They looked at Doctor Strange struggling to turn over on the ground and saying, "Spare his life, and I'll give you the stone." "Thanos, no tricks. Doctor Strange shook his head, and Iron Man said, "Don't." But Doctor Strange didn't listen to him. Instead, he held out his hand and materialized a bright green gem from thin air. This gem flew out of Doctor Strange's hand and slowly fell into Thanos' hand. Setting the time stone into the Infinity Gauntlet, Thanos trembled and murmured in a low voice, "One to go." Then Thanos opened a portal with the space stone and disappeared. At that moment, the cold voice of the system rang out. "All of today's questions have been asked and answered correctly. Now, all you have to do is say leave in your mind, and you are free to go back to where you were. Congratulations on the successful completion of your task. Hearing this, Tony and others looked at each other for a moment. No one left. Then, several voices rang at the same time. "I want to request a broadcast of my future." "Wait. I want it too. I said it first." Ding. Loki Odinson requested a video of the future. Current position, first place. Ding. Tony Stark requested a video of the future. Current position, second place. Ding. Stephen Strange is not in the queue. Hell, I can't believe these two guys got the jump on me. Strange shook his head with some irritation. In fact, he mainly wanted to know why he would voluntarily hand over the time stone in the future. Is Tony Stark's life really that important? And, did Thanos exterminate half the population of the universe in the future or not? Ha 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 ha. Looking at the upset Tony and Strange, Loki laughed with glee. Ding. Loki Odinson used up 100 live broadcast points. Start broadcasting future video. The first thing that appeared on screen was a smoky, devastated city, almost as if a war had just been fought. Looking at the familiar buildings in the city, Tony and Strange contracted their pupils and almost simultaneously jolted. This is obviously New York. Could it be that in the future, New York would actually be attacked? Inside a building, a man wearing a battle suit, holding a star-embellished shield, was talking to someone with a serious face. On my way down to coordinate search and rescue. Looking at the man's face and clothes, Tony frowned tightly, and a sense of absurdity suddenly flooded his heart. This is Captain America. How is that possible? Hasn't he been dead for 60, 70 years? Just beside the path where Captain America walked, Loki was handcuffed with both hands. It seems that he was a prisoner. Suddenly, a bright light flashed, and Loki instantly became the spitting image of Captain America. On my way down to coordinate search and rescue. Captain Loki made a sarcastic remark and then changed back. I mean, honestly, how do you? Shut up. Thor, standing on the side, directly picked up a device and sealed Loki's mouth. Then, Tony Stark, Thor, and a group of American soldiers escorted Loki into an elevator. Hulk tried to get into the elevator but was stopped by Tony. Seeing this, there were already a couple of people who couldn't help but comment in the live chat group. Loki Odinson, brother, you are really kind to me in the future. Now I finally understand why I died for you. TSK. Thor, Loki, there must be some misunderstanding. Why would I do that to you? Loki Odinson, HMPH, you actually left me in the care of those disgusting human soldiers. As expected of the next king of Asgard, he's really broad-minded. Thor. At this moment, not to mention Thor, even Odin was a little annoyed. The Asgardians had always prided themselves on being the masters of 9 realms, and Loki was a noble prince. As the crown prince of Asgard, how could Thor give his brother to humans? Tony and Thor escorted Loki into the hall. Suddenly, there was an argument. In the dispute, a suitcase fell to the ground. Someone picked up the suitcase. The guy walked towards the emergency stairs. Suddenly, Hulk burst through the door, and the suitcase flew out. The suitcase fell open, and a strange blue cube fell out of it. That's the Tesseract. Seeing that familiar cube, everyone's attention in the live broadcast was raised. Tesseract landed right at Loki's feet. Loki bent down and picked up the cube, then activated a portal to transport himself out. Seeing this scene, Odin suddenly sighed. The corners of his eyes were a little wet. The video in front of them proved that Loki knew that he had to escape with the Tesseract. But on that spaceship, instead of sending himself away, he offered the Tesseract to Thanos. In the end, he sacrificed his own life to save Thor. The video continued. Through a spatial portal, Loki fell in the middle of a desert. He just stood up, and not long after, he saw another portal suddenly opening up next to him. Several heavily armed personnel came out of it. Appears to be a standard sequence violation. A black woman walked out of the portal, holding a device. She looked at Loki and said, "Variant identified. On behalf of the Time Variance Authority, I hereby arrest you for crimes against the sacred timeline. Hands up. You're coming with us. I'm sorry, who's us? Last chance, Variant." Loki laughed angrily when he heard that. "I think I've had my fill of idiots in armored suits telling me what to do. So, if you don't mind, this is actually your last chance. Now, get out of my way." Seeing Loki rushing towards her, the black woman raised the special weapon in her hand without saying a word. Bang! Loki was shocked in the face. His cheek turned into a weird shape in the air, and his whole body actually fell into some sort of slow-motion movie scene. What? Looking at his sad and funny appearance on screen, Loki's scalp felt a little numb, and he subconsciously gulped. One hit. I can't even resist a single blow. Who are these Time Variance Authority people? This is the power of time. Looking at Loki in the video, as if the slow-motion button was pressed, Master Ancient One's expression became grave for the first time. She really did not expect that someone other than herself, who possessed the Time Stone, had mastered the power to manipulate time. And the most incredible thing was, the one wielding this kind of power was only a captain of basic soldiers. Even the pawns at the bottom were powerful, so what kind of person was the leader of the Time Variance Authority? Wanda Maximoff, ha 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 ha. Loki's face was bulging. It looks so funny, happy smiley. Wanda Maximoff, so this is how this live chat group works. Thor, little girl, you should pay attention to your words. Don't you know that my brother is a god? Wanda Maximoff, oh, what are you going to do if I don't watch my words? Gag me like you did your brother. Thor, I hate mortals. _ Looking at Wanda's message on screen, Loki didn't even care. At this moment, his mood was just full of irritability and depression. What's going on? Is my future always going to be this miserable? I, the god of mischief of Asgard. If I can't beat Thanos, then that's fine. How come I'm reduced to the point where I can't even beat an unknown third-rate soldier? You're now moving at 1/16 th speed. The black woman took out a collar and leisurely placed it around Loki's neck. But feeling all that pain in real time. Time around, Loki suddenly returned to normal, while he seemed to be paralyzed in the desert due to excessive pain and couldn't even stand up. Reset the timeline. Several Time Authority soldiers held Loki up. The Black Woman bent down to pick up the Tesseract, and another person placed a strange device on the ground. Loki's face was full of shock as he was carried into the portal by two soldiers. Then, they entered a different space, which actually looked a bit like the front desk of a company. At this moment, a man was pushed in by another soldier. "My father is on the board of Goldman Sachs, as long as I make a phone call." Loki looked around. As if he had found an opportunity, he quickly started to run. The Black Woman beside him didn't even go after him. After watching Loki run away, she reached out and took out a small device and pressed a button. Whoosh! Loki was instantly transported back to his original position. He looked back in shock, undeterred, and tried to escape again. The Black Woman gave him a mocking smile and pressed the button again. Whoosh! Loki was sent back again. "What is that?" Loki looked shocked, stretched out his hand and grabbed the collar around his neck, and seemed to have found the crux of the problem. But he couldn't do anything at all. He was pushed into an elevator by the Black Woman. There was a strange robot installed in the elevator, with 4 mechanical claws and a small screen where the face was located. Seeing the robot's paw reaching out to his body, Loki opened it with one hand. "Absolutely not. This is fine Asgardian leather." The robot showed a sad expression on its screen. It raised the ray gun on the other mechanical claw and pointed it at Loki. "Hold very still." Before Loki could react, an eerie glow shot out from that ray gun, disintegrating all the clothes on his body. Ah! In the otherworldly live-streaming room, Wanda let out a small scream and reached out to cover her eyes as if she saw something dirty. "Hey, human brat, you're acting too rude." Loki turned his head and shouted at her, but the expression on his face was extremely ugly. His future situation was really getting worse and worse. Is there no end to this humiliation? Next, Loki was forced to change into a prison uniform. He also signed a document and finally entered a waiting hall. Loki just walked into the hall, and the soldier next to him prompted, "Take a ticket. There's only 2 of us in here." The soldier's tone instantly turned serious. "Take a ticket." Loki bit his teeth, walked to the ticket machine with a face of displeasure, and took out a ticket. But just after a few steps, Loki seems to be unable to control his emotions anymore. He opened his hand and shouted, "This is a mistake. I shouldn't be here." At this moment, there was a strange sound in the hall. "Hi there," you're probably saying, "this is a mistake. I shouldn't be here." What? Loki turned his head, only to see several screens on the walls of the hall, starting to play the images. A round cartoon character, smiling on the screen, said, "Welcome to the Time Variance Authority. I'm Miss Minute. And it's my job to catch you up before you stand trial for your crimes." An endless sea of stars appeared on the screen, and then a lightning bolt pierced through all the clutter. Long ago, there was a vast multiversal war. Multiverse. Hearing this noun, Master Ancient One's pupil instantly contracted, and her attention instantly reached its peak. Meanwhile, in Asgard, Odin also took a deep breath. If this mysterious time variance authority is really involved with the multiverse, it's no joke. In that multiversal war, countless unique timelines battle each other for supremacy, nearly resulting in the total destruction of, well, everything. But then, the all-knowing timekeepers emerged, bringing peace by reorganizing the multiverse into a single timeline. The sacred timeline. Now the timekeepers protect and preserve the proper flow of time for everyone and everything. But sometimes, people like you veer off the path the timekeepers created. We call those variants. Maybe you started an uprising or were just late for work. Whatever it was, stepping off your path created a nexus event, which if left unchecked, could branch into madness, leading to another multiversal war. But don't worry. To make sure that that doesn't happen, the timekeepers created the TVA and all its incredible workers. The TVA has stepped in to fix your mistake and set time back on its predetermined path. Now that your actions have left you without a place on the timeline, you must stand trial for your offenses. So, sit tight, and we'll get you in front of a judge in no time. Just make sure you have your ticket, and you'll be seen by your next available attendant. Loki stared at it for a while, then let out a sneer. Timekeepers. The sacred timeline. Who actually believes these bunch of... Just as Loki was dismissing this, he suddenly heard arguing voices from behind him. Ticket, sir. Loki looked back and saw that the son of Goldman Sachs board member was arguing with a guard. Why are you raising your voice with me, buckethead? Before the Goldman Sachs kid words were done, Loki saw the guard raise his weapon and point it at the kid without mercy. Ah! Accompanied by a strange shout, the entire body of that Goldman Sachs kid was sparkling, as if he was paper, burning up without leaving any ashes. Looking at the horrific scene in front of him, Loki's face was white with fear, and his whole body was panicking. Then, he seemed to come back to his senses and desperately searched his entire body's pockets, finally finding the ticket in one pocket. With a long sigh of relief, Loki hurriedly held his red ticket over his head for fear that the guards next to him couldn't see it. Ha 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 ha. In the live stream room, Wanda was again laughing out loud without any concern for her image. Listening to this reckless laughter, Loki's face turned blue, and the impulse to cover his face rose for a moment. It was embarrassing. So many people saw his frightened appearance. How would he face Thor in the future? But at this moment, others were focusing on more important things, and no one cared about him at all. Stephen Strange, Master Mordo, have you ever heard of this time variance authority? Master Mordo, I don't know. Maybe Master Ancient One knows something. Maybe. This is a secret that only the Sorcerer Supreme is qualified to know. Thor, what's so great about the Sorcerer Supreme? In this universe, there's nothing that my father doesn't know. Master Mordo, say what you will, but once it comes to the realm of time, our Sorcerer Supreme is the most knowledgeable person in the universe. Thor, nonsense, how dare you underestimate my father? Just then, in Asgard, Odin sat on his throne with a sense of surprise and apprehension in his sole remaining eye. Although he was the god king of the 9 realms, he had actually only lived for a few thousand years. For example, the god king who repelled the dark elves and seized the ether 5,000 years ago was Odin's father, Bor. And this kind of multiversal war, which existed trillions of years ago, was unheard of even for Odin. In shock, Odin had an incredible idea in his head. He had been living in seclusion in Asgard for many years. Was he already out of touch with the outside world? There was such an amazing institution as Time Variance Authority, and he knew nothing about it. The more he thought about it, the more horrified he felt. Odin only felt that the worldview he had built up so easily in his life had been renewed at this moment. At this time, in Kamar Taj, Master Ancient One said nothing. Her eyes seemed confused. As the keeper of the time stone and the inheritor of the Sorcerer Supreme's knowledge for generations, the Ancient One's knowledge of the roots of this universe was far greater than others could imagine. In her opinion, the words of Miss Minute in the video were full of flaws. The Ancient One's eyes were still sharp, and she had a vague guess in her heart. There must be a problem with this time variance authority. By this time, Loki had been escorted by the black woman and entered a courtroom. A black female judge in the high seat asked. Laufeyson, variant L1130, aka Loki Laufeyson, is charged with sequence violation 72089. How do you plead? Laufeyson. Hearing this name, Thor and Loki both looked puzzled. Loki's last name should be Odinson. In Asgard's hall, Odin's and Frigga's expressions slightly changed. Their hearts were beating faster and uncontrollable. Not good. Loki's origins wouldn't be exposed like this, would it? Ha ha. Facing the questioning of the female judge, Loki's face once again showed his trademark arrogant smile. A god doesn't plead. Look, this has been a very enjoyable pantomime, but I'd like to go home now. The female judge shook her head and asked impatiently. Are you guilty or not guilty, sir? Loki sneered. Guilty of being the god of mischief. Yes. Guilty of finding all of this incredibly tedious. Yes. Guilty of crime against the sacred timeline. TSK, absolutely not, you have the wrong person. The female judge asked with some curiosity. Oh really, and who should we have? I suspect the Avengers. Loki replied without hesitation. I only came into possession of the Tesseract, because they traveled through time. Believe me, you can even smell the cologne on 2 Starks. You speak of time criminals, it's they that you should be after. Perhaps you could provide me with a task force and resources, I could return and eliminate them for you. Hearing Loki's decisive accusation, there was an uproar in the otherworldly live stream room. The Avengers. What the hell is that? Wanda looked at Tony warily. In her view, since that organization was involved with the wicked Tony Stark, it was definitely not a good thing. Time travel. Me. Surprisingly, Tony rubbed his chin, but his face showed a smug smile. Sure enough, how could someone do something as avant-garde as time travel without him? However, the technology controlled by the Time Variance Authority in the video was not simple. Just using a collar. They could perfectly control other people's time. And the ability to separate the passage of time from a person's consciousness so that the other person could still feel the pain in its entirety when time slowed down was incredible. Such a high-tech product, I really wonder what kind of principle is used to make it. Thinking of that, Tony suddenly turned away and looked at Loki confidently. So, give you an army, and you can destroy me. You probably don't know what I do yet. The most powerful army on Earth is armed by my company. By the way, I never use cologne. The smell doesn't match my style. Looking at Tony, who almost had the word arrogance written on his face, Loki snorted coldly. Human armies are not worth anything in front of a god. The video continues. We're not here to talk about the Avengers. The female judge slowly said. What they did was supposed to happen. Ha! Loki frowned, then let out a sneer. So, what I did was not supposed to happen. According to who? The timekeepers. The judge seemed to have grown a little impatient. Oh, the timekeepers, right. Loki made an exaggerated expression of awe. Well, Perhaps I should speak to these timekeepers, gods to gods. I'm sorry, but they're quite busy. The judge finally lost her patience. How do you plead? Loki's eyes darkened, and he opened his hands to both sides. Guilty of this. As soon as the words left his mouth, his two hands clenched violently and squeezed into fists. Then, nothing happened. The female guard standing behind him showed a mocking smile on her face. What going on? The female judge asked with some confusion. He's trying to use his powers, the guard replied with a smile. Loki's face was full of disbelief as he pushed himself hard and kept clenching his fists repeatedly. Finally, he gave up and slapped the railing in front of him. Damn it! Why wouldn't it work? Magic power, they're no good in the TVA, Mr. Laufeyson. The female judge looked at Loki coldly and pronounced. The court finds you guilty. And I sentence you to be reset. Reset? What does that mean? Hearing this ominous verdict, Loki's face was flustered. But the guards rushed up and pulled him down. Thinking of the Goldman Sachs kid who just vanished, Loki finally screamed in desperation. You ridiculous bureaucrats will not dictate how my story ends. You have no idea what I'm capable of. This is my future. Looking at the desperate struggle of himself on screen, not being able to break free from the guards. Loki's heart was racing, and he was unconsciously gripping the frostman in his hand. Am I going to get killed again? No way. Is my future that gloomy? Just when everyone thought Loki was going to be pulled out to reset, a man's voice suddenly sounded from the screen. I think I might. A middle-aged man stood up from the audience in court. He went to the female judge and soon persuaded her. The middle-aged man left the court with Loki and went to the corridor. Although lucky enough to survive, Loki was still full of complaints and spoke as they walked along. I'm going to burn this place to the ground. The middle-aged man spoke with a light smile. I'll show you where my desk is, you can start there. Heh. Loki was upset when he heard it. He was about to retort, but his attention was suddenly attracted by the scenery outside the window. Outside the window, there was a huge high-tech futuristic city. Loki looked surprised. I thought there was no magic here. There isn't. The middle-aged man casually replied. That's not real. Loki looked with his eyes glazed over, instinctively trying to deny what was in front of him. It is. And unfortunately, so is all the paperwork. The middle-aged man shook his head and said so as if he was laughing at himself. Loki seems to remain in a trance, muttering to himself in a trance. This place is a nightmare. The middle-aged man said, that's another department. Now that department, I'll help you burn down. Looking at the two walking into the elevator in the video, Tony Stark finally couldn't help it. He turned to look at Loki and immediately turned on his annoying side. How can you think of high technology as magic? How much have you never seen in the world? What did you say? Loki's face darkened, and he coldly replied. Only a stupid mortal like you would think that that place in the video is operated by science. In Loki's opinion, if the Time Variance Authority could really play with time, then behind them, there was definitely a god who was incredibly powerful. So, if he were replaced by the current one, he would also ask for an equal exchange between gods with those so-called timekeepers, just like in the video. Because Loki refused to accept it. Why can these gods decide what should happen and what shouldn't happen? In the video, those so-called Avengers had traveled through time. But they weren't treated as time offenders. In the future, he simply used the space stone to travel through space. Does this deserve a reset? Are you kidding? This is so unfair. Looking at Loki's face full of anger and disbelief, Tony shrugged his shoulders with a regretful look. From the last video, I saw that you aliens know how to pilot a spaceship. I thought I could talk to you about technology. I didn't expect you guys were just a bunch of frogs at the bottom of the well. What? You damned mortal. Seeing Loki's angry look, Tony smiled gently and spoke with confidence. Since you don't understand, I'll explain to you what kind of technology the so-called Time Variance Authority or TVA uses. Tony gestured with both hands to the batons used by the armed TVA guards. I see it very clearly. There are two modes of this weapon. When the tip of the baton lights up with a purple light, the effect caused is to slow down the flow of time. Loki's face slightly changed when he heard that. He clearly remembered that after being hit by the female guard in the video, his whole face became weird and stayed in the air for several seconds. And if the baton lights up with a yellow light, it can cause extinction. Tony's voice suddenly became icy cold. That stupid Goldman Sachs kid was hit by a yellow glowing baton and then vanished. Looking at Loki, Tony suddenly added. The robot in the elevator also used yellow light when stripping your clothes. What? Loki listened in horror. If this was true, then his future self, wasn't he almost turned into ash along with those clothes? Coupled with the collar that can control an individual's time, I'm now sure that this Time Variance Authority is an organization that relies on advanced technology to control time and space. Tony was getting more and more excited. In the end, he simply extended his fist and waved it in the air. This is the power of science. There was complete silence in the otherworldly live streaming room, and all eyes were focused on Tony's body. Even Wanda's face changed a little. Although Stark was sinful, insolent, and cocky. But when it came to science, this guy's confidence was enough to surpass the gods. The video continues. In the elevator, the middle-aged man introduced himself to Loki and said he was Agent Mobius. Loki asked him curiously, "How long have you been here?" Agent Mobius opened his hands. "I don't know. It's hard to say. Time passes differently here in the TVA." "What does that mean?" Facing Loki's question, Agent Mobius just replied, "You'll catch up." After leaving the elevator, Loki finally couldn't restrain the irritation in his heart and fiercely asked, "So, you're part of the TVA's courageous dedicated workforce?" Mobius simply responded, "Yes. You were created by the Timekeepers." "Yup. To protect the sacred timeline." "Correct." When Loki heard this, he finally stopped and laughed sarcastically. "Ha ha ha ha." Mobius calmly asked, "Is that funny?" Loki responded coldly, "The idea that your little club decides the fate of trillions across all of existence. At the behest of 3 space lizards. Yes. It's funny. It's absurd." Listening to Loki's snarky words, Mobius didn't show any emotional waves. He just said, "I thought you said you didn't like to talk." Facing such an opponent, Loki's verbal shots seemed to hit cotton. He could only sigh helplessly. The two people entered a room. There was only one table in the room, as well as an orb-like machine placed on the table. As soon as he entered the room, Loki's expression became ugly. "For the record, this really feels like a killing me kind of room." While reaching out to tweak the orb, Mobius replied, "You're not big on trust, are you?" Loki's tone seemed cold. Trust is for children and dogs. There's only one person you can trust. Yourself. I like it, you should slap it on a t-shirt. Mobius laughed. Look at the conversation between Loki and Mobius in the video. Frigga's eyes widened in disbelief, and Odin's expression turned a little ugly. Loki wasn't as popular as Thor in Asgard, but as a whole, he was still a positive god who just liked to play tricks. Why was he so cynical in the future? And listening to his words, it seems that everyone in Asgard was regarded as passers-by. How is that possible? If Loki is such a ruthless man, then why would he later sacrifice his life for Thor? Odin's heart was full of doubts, and at the end of the thought, he felt his head hurt. However, the next question from Loki in the video instantly shocked Odin. If the TVA truly oversees all of the time, how have I never heard of you until now? Because you never needed to, you have always lived within your set path. Mobius replied. Loki immediately raised his voice, I live within whatever path I choose. Mobius didn't continue to refute him this time but simply said. Sure, you do. Okay, come and have a seat. Hearing this dialogue on the video, countless people from Asgard to Kamar Taj gasped. That sounded horrific. If what Agent Mobius said was true, wouldn't the existence of them all be like a program on a computer? The lives of everyone in the world had long been set by the three mysterious, omnipresent, above all things timekeepers. Even if they deviated from the path set by the timekeepers due to some accident, the mysterious and unpredictable time variance authority would immediately send someone to intervene, taking them prisoner as time offenders. This kind of thing was simply appalling. In Kamar Taj, Master Mordo only felt a chill from his tailbone all the way to the top of his head. The hairs stood up all over his body, and he couldn't help but turn his head to the Ancient One to ask. Master, are those timekeepers real? Master Ancient One didn't directly answer Mordo's question, but gently said. Mordo, nothing can decide the fate of everyone in the world. You can't, I can't, the Time Stone can't, and the so-called timekeepers can't. Mordo let out a long sigh of relief as he heard it and put his heart at ease. At this time, the Master Ancient One had a deep gaze, her heart had already settled. By now, she was certain that the three timekeepers that Mobius had spoken of were probably frauds. However, the hand behind this scam had really mastered the power of time beyond imagination. In the small room, Loki watched Mobius tweaking the orb and suddenly felt an opportunity to take advantage of it, so he began to approach him quickly. However, Mobius wasn't an idle person. Without saying anything, he raised the remote control in his hand and clicked. Swish, Loki's time was reset, helplessly returning to his original position. Mobius softly said, I told you, time moves differently in the TVA. Peter Parker couldn't help but gasp and ask. Mr. Stark, do you think what that Mobius just said is true? Tony pondered for a while, his expression suddenly relaxed. From a scientific point of view, they should be controlling the life trajectory of all intelligent life in the universe. It's an impossible task. If this time variance authority is really an institution dominated by scientific forces, as I think, then no matter how powerful their technical force is, they wouldn't be able to control everything. Hearing Tony's words, Peter Parker exhaled a long breath, and his whole body relaxed. After seeing Thanos' astounding divine power and the time variance authority's unfathomable methods, Peter only felt that his worldview had shattered beyond recognition. But now, he also realized that this mustached guy named Tony Stark was really a big shot in the field of science. Since even he said so, Peter felt that he could put his worries down for the time being. His life belonged to him, not some program from the timekeepers. The video continues. Mobius and Loki sat at both sides of a table. Looking at Loki, who was resisting in front of him, Mobius opened a can of beverage. I specialize in the pursuit of dangerous variants. Like me? Loki asked coldly. Mobius took a sip of his drink and shook his head. No. Particularly dangerous variants. You're just a... He glanced at Loki and shook his head gently. Little pussycat. What? In the otherworldly live stream room, Loki only felt a surge of fire rushing straight to his head. This human, how dare he despise me so much? Even as a criminal, I, Loki, should be the most dangerous and scary one. I have a set of questions for you. You answer them honestly, and then maybe, I can give you something you want. You want to get out of here, right? Seeing Loki tilting his head, Mobius smiled approvingly. Yeah, so we'll start there. Should you return, what are you going to do? Loki pondered and replied. Finish what I started. Mobius raised an eyebrow. Which is? Loki proudly replied. Claim my throne. You want to be king? I don't want to be, I was born to be. Loki replied firmly. Aha, I know, but king of what exactly? With Mobius questioning again, Loki finally gave the answer. Midgard. All right. Now you're the king of Midgard, then what? Mobius kept questioning, getting to the root of the matter. Loki had his signature evil smile on his face. Asgard, the 9 realms. Seeing this, Odin sighed helplessly. For the first time, a feeling of regret rose in his heart. When Thor and Loki were children, he told them that they were born to be kings. Odin's original intention was to make them the kings of Asgard and Jotunheim, respectively, to keep the two places in perpetual peace. But now it seemed that his remark simply provoked Loki's ambition in an unsuitable manner. Thor, Loki, you wanted to be the king of the 9 realms. Why didn't you tell me about it? Loki Odinson, idiot. I'm just fooling Mobius in the video. Why are you taking it seriously? Thor, oh, worthy of the god of mischief. I think that guy totally believes it. Ha ha. Looking at the messages on the screen, Tony sighed, turned to look at Loki, pointed to his own temple, and asked in a whisper. Is your brother's brain always like this? Loki gave Tony a cold glare but eventually nodded faintly. That's why he was so upset. Why can such a man be king, but I, Loki, can't? That's it for this video, guy. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also tell me your recommendations in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.